Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Story Relaxing. Tonight we step softly into a Viking winter in the year 1011 AD, where the world is white. The air bites your cheeks, and every breath leaves you like a small ghost. You stand at the edge of a farmstead somewhere in the Norse world, with snow pressed against timber walls, smoke leaking from a roof hole, and the low shapes of animals shifting in the dimness nearby. It is beautiful, yes, in the way a frozen lake is beautiful before it reminds you that you probably won't survive this without wool, luck, and several people more competent than you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell me where you are listening from and what your local time is right now. Maybe it is midnight in Toronto, dawn in Singapore, or a rainy evening in Dublin. Now, dim the lights and let the cold come nearer, gently, not as a shock, but as a slow closing hand around the year. You are standing in winter's doorway, and the doorway is low enough that you have to bend your head. The farm before you is not a village in the neat modern sense. It is a small cluster of human effort. A longhouse, a few outbuildings, fences half buried in snow, stacked firewood, and a path beaten hard by feet, hooves, and the dragging of sledges. Beyond it, the land rolls away into pale fields, dark woodland, and the bruised blue line of hills. Somewhere far beyond those hills, ships wait for spring, but here, tonight, nothing moves quickly. The first thing you notice is the sound, not silence. Exactly. Winter is never truly silent. It creaks, it sighs, it ticks in the walls where frozen timber contracts. Snow settles with soft little collapses. A raven gives one rude call from a naked branch, as if unimpressed by the entire medieval experience. Under your boots, the packed snow makes that dry. Powdery crunch that tells you the temperature has fallen well below comfort and is now exploring cruelty as a lifestyle. The air smells sharp and clean until the wind shifts. Then it carries smoke, animal breath, old hay, damp wool, and something sour from a refuse heap hidden under snow. You might imagine the Viking Age as all shining helmets and heroic sea voyages, but winter introduces you to the household economy of not freezing. Glamour is in short supply, frost is everywhere, your eyelashes sting, or your fingers begin complaining immediately, because fingers are very honest historians. The year is 1011 AD, across the North Sea. Scandinavian armies and raiding bands are deeply entangled with England, taking tribute, pressing power, and shaping politics in ways that will soon change kingdoms. But here on the farm, the wider world arrives as rumour. Silver, worry, and absence. Someone's brother may be overseas, someone's son may be with a lord, someone's husband may not come back until Thor, if he comes back at all. Winter makes geography larger. A day's walk becomes a serious undertaking. A fjord, a forest, or a frozen bog becomes not just scenery, but a decision. You step closer to the longhouse. It is built low and sturdy, made of timber, turf, wattle, daub, and whatever local materials the land offers. A mainstream historical fact settles around you as naturally as the snow. Many Viking Age families lived in long houses where people, fire, storage, tools, and sometimes animals existed under one long roof or in closely connected spaces. The house is not just a home, it is shelter, workshop, pantry, meeting room, sleeping hall, weather machine, an emotional pressure cooker, very efficient, very smoky. Not exactly open concept unless you count the hole in the roof. The walls seem to lean into the weather. Turf on the roof helps hold warmth, though it also looks like a sleeping hill has decided to become architecture. Snow gathers along the roofline in soft ridges. Icicles hang like pale teeth. The doorway is small to keep heat from escaping, which means you must stoop again. Humility in this period is partly structural, Before you enter, you pause on the threshold and look down. The snow is tracked by people and animals. There are boot marks, hoof prints, the little marks of dogs, and perhaps the delicate stitching of birds. Near the fence, hay has spilled and frozen into lumps. A wooden bucket sits half buried, its iron hoop rimed white. The household has been preparing for this season since summer, cutting hay, drying fish, smoking meat, storing grain, repairing walls, collecting fuel. Winter is not an event here, it is a test you study for all year, and even then, the exam is rude. Historians still argue whether ordinary Viking Age households experienced winter mainly as a season of social closeness and skilled resilience, or as a grinding period of danger that later stories made seem warmer and more heroic than it really was. The truth, as usual, is probably sitting somewhere by the hearth with wet socks. People know what they are doing, they have inherited methods, rhythms, and tools from generations who learned the hard way. But knowledge does not cancel hunger. Experience does not cancel a storm. Being tough does not make your toes warmer. It only makes you quieter about them. A gust of wind crosses the yard, lifting loose snow in pale ribbons. You pull your cloak tighter, or at least you try to, because the cloak pin is colder than seems personally necessary. Your clothing matters now, in a way modern life often lets you forget. A loose seam, a damp hem, a missing mitten, any small failure becomes a negotiation with pain. You understand why textile work is survival work. You understand why the sheep are not just cute background animals, but walking emergency blankets with opinions. At the edge of the yard, someone has stacked firewood beneath a rough cover. It is precious. Every piece represents labour cutting, splitting, hauling, drying, guarding against rot. In some parts of the Norse world, especially where trees are fewer. Fuel can include peat, driftwood, dung, brush, and anything that will burn long enough to keep breath in bodies. A quirky little tidbit. Not quite the romantic saga detail people put on postcards. Dried animal dung could be burned as fuel in places where wood was scarce. So yes, the cosy Viking glow may, on certain evenings, come with a farmyard aroma. History loves to humble the scented candle industry. You imagine arriving here as a guest. Hospitality matters. A stranger at the door can be a danger, a burden, a messenger, or a blessing. In winter, turning someone away might be close to a death sentence, but feeding them may also strain the household stores. Every kindness has weight. Every extra mouth is counted, not necessarily with a cruelty, but with the sharp arithmetic of cereal. How much grain remains? How many fish hang from the rafters? Is the cow still giving milk? Will the hay last until the first grass? Inside, voices murmur. You cannot yet make out the words. Old Norse, regional dialects, maybe bits of other tongues if people have travelled. The language rolls behind the door like low water over stones. You hear a child laugh, then someone hushes them, not harshly, just tiredly. A dog barks once, an animal stamps, the fire pops, the house breathes. And you, standing in the cold, begin to feel how winter changes time. Summer is outward. Summer moves toward fields, boats, markets, feasts, raids, courts, marriages, journeys. Winter turns the world inward. The body becomes local, the household becomes the map. A few yards between door and byre can feel like an expedition when the wind is up. A lost glove can matter. A cracked pot can matter. A bad mood can matter too, because there is nowhere glamorous to take it. You may have arrived expecting Vikings to laugh at cold weather with heroic indifference. That is adorable. They respect it instead. They plan around it. They complain about it. Surely. Because they are human and because complaining is one of history's most renewable resources. The cold is not conquered. It is managed, endured, bargained with, and occasionally cursed under one's breath in a language now reconstructed by scholars with impressive patience. Snow brushes against your ankles as you take the final steps to the door. The threshold is dark. The warmth beyond it is real. But so are the smoke, the crowding, the smells, the hunger, the low ceiling, and the long months ahead. You lift the latch. The wood is rough beneath your hand, polished by many palms. Behind you, the winter fields disappear into blue shadow. Ahead of you waits the longhouse, full of breath and embers, where survival begins not with adventure, but with getting inside before your feet go numb. You duck through the doorway and step into the longhouse breath. The change is immediate, though not exactly luxurious. Warmth reaches you first in layers, uneven and smoky, like a blanket that has been argued over by everyone in the room. The air is thick with the smell of burning wood, damp wool, old straw, cooked porridge, tallow, leather, and the unmistakable presence of animals nearby. It's not the crisp, pine-scented winter fantasy sold in modern gift shops. It is alive, used, crowded, and honest. Your eyes water almost at once, because the hearth smoke has opinions and wishes to share them directly with your face. You pause just inside, letting your sight adjust. The longhouse is dim even with the fire burning. Light comes from the central hearth, from small lamps with wicks floating in fat or oil, and from the greyish glow that sneaks through cracks and door gaps. The roof rises above you in dark ribs of timber, blackened by years of smoke. Shadows cling to the beams, somewhere up there. Dried herbs, tools, ropes, and food may hang beyond easy reach, safe from dogs, children, and the general medieval talent for misplacing important things. The house is longer than it is wide, shaped like a narrow world. Benches run along the walls, sleeping spaces are tucked near them, sometimes raised, sometimes boxed or curtained off with hangings if the household has the means. Storage chests sit where they can be guarded, sat upon, or used as tables. A loom may stand at one side, tall and quiet for now, though the weights at its bottom seem to wait like patient little stones. Shields, tools, harness bowls, harness pieces, baskets, bowls, and wooden cups occupy every available corner. Nothing here is decorative in the modern sense, yet nearly everything has been shaped by hand. Even plain objects carry the mark of fingers, knives, smoke, and time. A mainstream historical fact becomes very easy to understand as you stand there blinking through the haze. Viking-age longhouses often held extended households, including family members, dependents, workers, enslaved people, guests, and sometimes livestock in adjacent or connected spaces. Privacy is not the main feature. Survival is. Everyone shares warmth because warmth is costly. Everyone shares air because architecture has not yet discovered your preference for personal space. You feel bodies around you before you can count them. A woman bends over a pot, stirring slowly. An older man sits with a cloak over his shoulders, his face grooved by firelight. A child leans against a dog and nearly disappears into its fur. Someone scrapes a wooden bowl clean with a deep seriousness. Someone else twists wool fibre between fingers, making thread by habit more than sight. The movement is calm, not lazy, but energy is spent carefully in winter. Nobody wastes motion unless they are young, annoyed, or both. The central hearth is the heart of the house, but it is not a cheerful fireplace neatly trapped in stone. It is an open fire laid along the floor, managed with constant attention. Spark shift, embers glow under ash, smoke rises and searches for a way out through roof openings or vents, but some of it gets distracted and stays with you. Your throat tightens. You begin to understand why people might have red eyes, persistent coughs, and a tolerance for discomfort that would make a modern indoor air quality inspector faint dramatically into a sheepskin. And yet, without this smoke, there is no warmth, no cooked food, no light, no drying clothes, no comfort. The fire is problem and solution together. as many ancient technologies are. You sit near it, but not too near. Wool steams faintly where snowmelt leaves your hem. The heat touches one side of your face while your back remains cool. This is how warmth works here. Not as an even invisible setting on a wall, but as something you negotiate with your body. Turn slightly, stretch your hands, pull your feet closer. Move away before your shoes scorch. A very advanced thermostat, mostly elbows. The longhouse breathes through gaps, doorways, roof vents, and bodies. When wind presses against the walls, smoke bends. When the door opens, cold rushes in at ankle height, sliding across the packed earth floor like a pale animal. People mutter. Someone tells the child to close it faster next time. The child does not appreciate this architectural critique, but does obey. Beneath you, the floor may be beaten earth, possibly strewn with rushes, straw, or old plant material that can be changed when it becomes too unpleasant. Which, let's be honest, is probably not as often as your modern nose would vote for. A quirky tidbit from the wider medieval and Viking world floor layers in excavated houses can reveal tiny lost things, such as beads, fish bones, burnt grain, lice comb fragments, and scraps of craftwork, the household's forgotten confetti of daily life. Archaeologists can read dirt the way some people read diaries. The dirt is less dramatic, but often more truthful. You sit on a bench along the wall, shoulder to shoulder with the household. A cloak hangs behind you and blocks some of the draft. The bench is hard, but after standing outside in the cold, hard feels like civilization. Someone hands you a cup of something warmish, perhaps ale, broth, or thin gruel. It smells sour, smoky, and deeply necessary. You drink because refusing would be rude, and because warmth entering the body is different from warmth touching the skin. It spreads slowly downward, a small kindness in a century not famous for convenience. The longhouse has zones, even if nobody labels them. The hearth space is for cooking, heat, talk, and work that needs light. Sleeping areas line the edges, storage is guarded by habit and hierarchy. The higher status members of the household occupy the better position. Warmer, more central, farther from drafts, closer to honoured seating. Social order is not abstract here. It has a place on the bench. It decides who sits where, who eats first, who speaks freely, who listens, who serves, and who pretends not to hear an insult because winter is long and murder is terribly inconvenient indoors. Scholars continue to debate whether seating arrangements in Viking halls reflected fixed ceremonial ranking in ordinary homes as strongly as they did in elite feasting halls, or whether daily farm life was more flexible and practical. You can feel both possibilities in the room. There are customs, certainly, there is rank, but there is also a pot that needs stirring, a baby that needs soothing, and a dog that has decided the most important person is whoever drops fat into the ashes. Near the far end, you hear animals shifting. In some households, livestock might be housed in the same building at one end, separated by a partition, while in others they are kept in nearby byres. Either way, they are close enough to matter. Their body heat helps. Their smells do too, though help is not exactly the word your nose chooses. A cow exhales with a wet, patient sound. Sheep rustle in straw, something bumps wood with a horn or hoof. The animals are wealth, food, future labour, milk, wool, and risk. In winter, their survival and yours are braided together so tightly that the whole house seems to pulse with shared dependence. You look around again and see how darkness shapes life. People do not simply endure the dark, they work inside it. Hands learn tasks by repetition. Fingers know how to spin, carve, tie, mend, scrape, sort, and fold with limited light. Faces are half seen, voice is more important than expressions. Memory fills what sight cannot. Stories become architecture too, building invisible rooms in the dark. Outside, the winter presses against the walls. Inside, the longhouse answers with breath, smoke, heat, and human nearness. It is not comfortable in the soft modern way. It is comfort reduced to its older bones, shelter from wind, fire that still lives, food not yet gone, animals breathing, people present, and a place on the bench where your thawing hands can hover over the embers. As the door settles shut behind the last person coming in from the yard, the room seems to gather itself for the night. The fire pops, the roof beams creak, someone laughs under their breath at a comment you miss. A child yawns, open-mouthed and shameless. The smoke rises, the shadows sway, and you begin to understand that winter in 1011 is not faced alone. It is faced packed together under one roof, where every breath warms the next breath, and every small discomfort is part of the price of seeing morning. The warmth settles around you slowly, and with it comes the awareness that everyone in this house is listening to winter with their stomachs. Not loudly, of course. Hunger is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is just the careful scraping of a bowl. Sometimes it is the way a hand pauses before taking another piece of bread. Sometimes it is the quiet glance toward the storage chest, the hanging fish, the sacks, the sealed tubs, the places where summer has been packed away and asked very politely to last until spring. Last until you sit near the hearth and watch the evening meal take shape. A pot hangs over the fire, breathing steam into the smoky air. It may hold barley porridge, oats, peas, beans, bits of dried meat, herbs, maybe some onion or leek if the household has them. The smell is plain, warm, earthy, and slightly sour from smoke and iron. It is not a feast. It's not one of those cheerful banquet scenes where everyone tears into roasted meat while a poet conveniently knows 12 generations of ancestry. This is winter food. And winter food has one main job: keep the body moving until tomorrow. A mainstream historical fact sits in the steam before you. Viking Age diets depended heavily on preserved foods, including dried fish, smoked or salted meat, stored grain, dairy products, and whatever could be gathered, fermented, or kept through the cold months. Freshness is seasonal, preservation is intelligence. The household has spent warmer months turning perishable abundance into something that can survive darkness, frost, and mice with criminal ambition. You look up towards the rafters. There, in the smoky shadows, fish may hang stiff and pale, dried until there are almost more wood than flesh. In many northern coastal regions, cod and other fish are split, dried, and stored for months. Stockfish is tough, light, and transportable, which makes it useful not only for eating but also for trade. It does not look inviting at first glance. It looks like something that lost an argument with the wind, but soaked, pounded, cooked, and softened, it becomes protein. In winter, protein is poetry, even if it smells like a dock at low tide. Near the wall, sacks or bins hold grain. Barley is common in many parts of the Norse world, hardy enough for northern growing seasons. Oats, rye, and wheat may appear depending on region. Status and luck. Grain can be boiled into porridge, ground into meal, baked into flatbreads, brewed into ale, or stretched into soups. You can almost hear the grain whispering its many responsibilities. Bread is not always soft and fluffy. Often it is coarse, dense, gritty from stone grinding, and sometimes flavoured with smoke whether you ordered that or not. Someone lifts a lid from a wooden tub. The smell is sharp and sour. Dairy is another winter treasure, especially in the form of butter, cheese, curds, and fermented milk products. Cows, goats, and sheep are not just animals wandering around looking scenic. They are living storage systems that turn grass into food, clothing, labour, and social value. But in deep winter, milk may be scarce, depending on the animals and the household's planning. So what was made earlier must last. Sourness is not failure. Sourness is preservation doing its slightly alarming job. A child nearby receives a small portion and stares at it with the intense disappointment known to children in every century. The child wanted more. The child, unfortunately, has been born before the age of snacks. Someone murmurs a correction. Perhaps not unkindly. Eat now. Do not waste. There are still weeks of snow ahead. The child eats. You notice how portions are controlled without anyone making a grand speech about it. The person managing the meal knows who needs strength for outdoor labour, who is ill, who is pregnant, who is old, who is still growing, who is favoured, who is dependent, and who has been sneaking edges of cheese with the confidence of a tiny outlaw. Food is not only nutrition, it is hierarchy, it is care, it is discipline, it is power. Researchers still dispute how often ordinary Viking-age households face true famine in winter, as opposed to recurring lean seasons that were difficult but expected. The difference matters, but it may feel less comforting when you're staring at the bottom of your bowl in February. A bad harvest, a livestock disease, a storm that ruins fishing, or a household member returning unexpectedly with 2 hungry companions could tilt caution into crisis. Survival is rarely one big, heroic moment. More often, it is many small calculations made before anyone panics. The meal is ladled out, you receive your share, warm and thick, with a smell of grain, smoke, and a little fat. You bring it close and feel steam on your face. The spoon is wooden, worn smooth by use. The first taste is simple, but after the cold outside, simplicity feels generous. The porridge clings to the tongue. It has texture, maybe a few chewy peas, maybe a scrap of smoked meat that sends a ripple of happiness through your modern expectations. You chew slowly because everyone else does. In this room, fast eating looks greedy and also foolish. Winter meals are paced by scarcity. On a peg nearby hangs a bundle of herbs. Some are for flavour, some for health, some for both, because people do not always separate those categories neatly. Juniper, angelica, nettle, yarrow, wild garlic, seaweed, berries, and many other local plants can enter the winter diet depending on place and season. Dried plants shrink summer into little brittle handfuls. A few leaves in a pot can remind the tongue that the world was once green. It will be green again. Probably. Winter does not ask you to believe this every day, but it helps if you do. Then there is ale, not the strong festival drink of cinematic shouting, necessarily, but everyday fermented drink, sometimes weak, nourishing, and safer in certain contexts than questionable water. Brewing uses grain, labour, vessels, fuel, and skill. It is food as much as drink. It warms the mood, softens the edges of boredom, and gives adults something to hold while pretending not to worry. A cup passes near you, and its scent is grainy, sour-sweet, and smoky from the room itself. A quirky tidbit floats through the household memory in some Norse contexts. People preserved food in ways that might seem startling now, including fermenting fish or dairy until the smell became powerful enough to introduce itself before you did. Fermented shark is associated especially with Iceland in later tradition, and while you should be cautious about imagining every Viking nibbling it daily, the wider lesson is clear enough. Northern survival rewards anyone willing to redefine the word appetizing. Modern refrigerators have made many of us cowards. Comfortable cowards, yes, but cowards. The animals eat too, and their food matters as much as yours. Hay is stored for cattle and sheep. If hay runs out too early, wealth collapses on 4 legs. Slaughtering an animal may provide meat, hide, bone, and fat, but it also removes milk, wool, breeding, and future security. Keeping livestock alive through winter is like keeping tomorrow alive, somewhere beyond the partition. A cow pulls hay with slow satisfaction, unaware that it bestows several human beings are mentally accounting for every mouthful. You glance at the storage areas again. Food hangs, rests, ferments, dries, and waits. Smoked meat darkens in the rafters. Butter may be packed away, cheese hardens, nuts, berries, and apples, where available, may have been dried or stored. Salt, if the household has enough, is precious. Not just seasoning, but a defense against rot. In some areas, salt is made, traded, or carefully rationed. Without it, drying, smoking, souring, and freezing must do more work. The house smells richer now as bowls empty. Warm grain mixes with smoke and animal breath. Someone licks fingers clean, someone covers the pot. Nothing is wasted casually. Bones may be cracked for marrow, scraps go to dogs, stale bread thickens broth, ashes serve uses of their own, and leftovers, when they exist, become tomorrow's plan. You begin to understand that the winter pantry is not a room, it is a calendar. Every smoked fish is a day, every sack of grain is a promise, every tub of sour milk is a quiet argument against death. As the fire lowers and the meal sinks into tired bodies, conversation softens. A woman counts something under her breath. A man asks whether another bundle of fish should be taken down tomorrow. Someone mentions the weather signs, the hardness of the snow, the direction of the wind. It all sounds ordinary, but ordinary is where survival hides. You hold your bowl in both hands, feeling the last warmth through the wood, and realize that in this winter, food is not background, it is the story itself. Stored in rafters, guarded in chests, stretched in pots, shared by rank and love, and tasted slowly while the snow presses close against the walls. After the meal, warmth becomes something you wear as much as something you sit beside. You notice this most clearly when someone near the doorway rises to go outside. The simple act of leaving the longhouse is not casual. Nobody just pops out for a minute, because winter is not a polite neighbour. The person begins to prepare, gathering layers with the focused patience of someone who has done this all their life and would very much like to keep doing life tomorrow. Wool is pulled close. A cloak is fastened. Foot coverings are checked. A hood comes up. Mittens appear from somewhere, because bare fingers in deep cold are a terrible little experiment. You look down at yourself and understand that clothing here is not fashion first, though people absolutely care about beauty, colour, status, and display. Clothing is a shelter you carry. It is a second wall. It is the difference between work and injury, between walking to the animal pen and stumbling back with hands too numb to unfasten a latch. In a Viking winter, every layer has a task, and the body becomes a house with moving walls. Linen may sit closest to the skin when people can afford or access it, especially in shift or undergarments. Over that comes wool, the great northern miracle. Wool can hold warmth even when damp, and it can be spun, woven, felted, dyed, patched, traded, inherited, and argued over. It's practical, but also social. A finely woven garment says something different from a rough homespun tunic. A bright colour says something different from undyed grey or brown. Even in a smoky longhouse in 1011, people are still people. They notice who looks prosperous. They notice who has a good cloak. They notice who has repaired one sleeve so often it now seems to be mostly repair. Men commonly wear tunics, trousers or leggings, belts, cloaks, and leather shoes or boots, though styles vary by region and status. Women often wear a long underdress with an outer overdress or apron dress, fastened with brooches, with shawls, cloaks, or head coverings added for warmth and custom. That is not a costume party version of the Viking Age. It is the practical evidence suggested by graves, textile fragments, artwork, and comparative finds. The exact cut and arrangement can differ widely, and anyone claiming every Norse person dressed the same is probably trying to sell you a horned helmet souvenir, which is already a warning sign. A woman near the loom lifts a length of cloth and checks its edge by firelight. Her fingers move carefully, feeling the weave as much as seeing it. Cloth is slow wealth. Before a garment exists, sheep must be raised, fleeces clipped or plucked, wool cleaned, fibre prepared, thread spun, Thread dyed or left plain, cloth woven, fabric cut, seam stitched, and repairs made again and again. You may look at a cloak and see a cloak. The household sees months of labour resting on someone's shoulders. There is an unresolved question among textile specialists about how far ordinary winter clothing in the Viking world was standardised by shared custom, and how much local climate, trade access, household skill, and personal taste shaped what people actually wore day to day. The graves of the wealthy preserve brooches and hints of elegance. Wet ground and rare fragments preserve bits of fabric, but the patched, smoky, everyday clothing of common people is mostly returned to soil. Archaeology gives glimpses, not a complete wardrobe hanging neatly in a museum with labels saying "worn while miserable in February." The person going outdoors wraps their cloak tighter. Cloaks are beautifully simple and deeply useful. A rectangle or shaped piece of wool can become coat, blanket, hood, bundle, windbreak, sleeping cover, and emergency dignity when your tunic has seen better decades. It may be fastened with a pin or brooch at the shoulder, leaving one arm freer. The pin matters. Lose it in the snow and you may spend several unpleasant minutes discovering how much technology can depend on one small piece of metal. You notice belts too they gather clothing in, hold knives, pouches, keys, tools, and sometimes symbols of responsibility. A belt is a small storage system in a world without pockets in the modern sense. Pouches may contain a fire striker, comb, bits of cord, coins, needles, or whatever small object keeps a person functioning. The ordinary medieval body carries its own toolkit. Today you might forget your phone. In 1011 you might forget your knife, and that is somehow both less annoying and more dangerous. The shoes draw your attention next. Leather shoes in the Viking Age are often turn shoes, made inside out and then turned. Soft and flexible compared with heavy modern boots. They can be stuffed with hay, wool, moss, or extra wrappings for insulation. Socks or footcloths help, when available. Still, snow and slush are relentless. Wet feet in winter are not a minor inconvenience. They are an invitation to pain, sickness, and the sort of mood that makes everyone in the longhouse wish you would sit somewhere else. An odd little survival detail has been found in northern traditions. More broadly, people sometimes use dried grasses, hay, or even soft moss inside footwear for warmth and dryness. It sounds rustic until you imagine standing in snow with thin leather between you and the earth. Suddenly moss becomes luxury, nature's insole, slightly crumbly, probably itchy, but better than frostbite. There is no customer service desk for the 11th century foot. You raise your hands to the fire and think about mittens. Gloves are clever, but mittens are warmer because fingers share heat. In very cold conditions, the hand prefers teamwork. Wool mittens, knall-binding mittens, leather coverings, and layered hand protection all make sense here. Knall-binding, an older looping textile technique made with a needle, produces strong and elastic items such as socks and mittens. It is not knitting, though it can look similar to a sleepy modern eye. If you make a mistake explaining that to a textile historian, they may not harm you, but they will correct you with alarming speed. Colour enters the room in small ways. Not everything is brown. Dyes from plants, lichens, bark, roots, and imported materials can produce yellows, reds, blues, greens, and other shades, especially for those with means. Blue from woad, reds from madder, yellows from weld or other plants, and richer imported dyes all carry value. A bright garment can be status, joy, memory, or simply proof that someone in the household has skill and patience. Winter may dull the land, but people do not always surrender to dullness. Fur appears too, though perhaps not in the exaggerated fantasy style of everyone wrapped like a dramatic warlord. Fur trim, linings, caps, mittens, and blankets can be valuable, practical, and regionally important. Fox, sheep, goat, bear, seal, or other skins may be used depending on the availability and status. But fur is labour and wealth, not casual decoration. If you are wearing it. Someone trapped, hunted, skinned, scraped, cured, stitched, and maintained it. Nothing warm is effortless. You see repairs everywhere now that you know to look. A patch at the elbow, a darned sock, a reworked hem, a child's garment made from an adult's older cloth. Clothing moves through lives. It is cut down, passed along, turned inside out, salvaged, and reborn. A sleeve might outlive its first owner in another form, a cloak might become a blanket, then wrapping, then rags, then perhaps tinder. Waste is a luxury the household does not admire. The person at the doorway finally lifts the latch. Cold slides in low and fast, flowing around ankles. Everyone feels it. Someone complains softly. The traveller steps out, wrapped, layered, and still vulnerable. You watch the figure cross the yard, cloak snapping slightly in the wind, boots biting into snow, breath streaming pale. And you understand that dressing for a Viking winter is not one act. It is a daily ritual of judgment. How hard is the wind? How long will you be outside? Are your shoes dry? Is your wool mended? Will your cloak stay fastened? Will you sweat while working? Then chill when you stop. The body must be managed like a small fire. Kept warm but not damp, protected but still able to move. Inside, someone returns to mending by the hearth, pulling thread through cloth with quiet concentration. The needle flashes once, then disappears into shadow. Winter waits outside the door, patient and endless. But here in the smoky glow, wool grows into armour, linen into comfort, leather into footing, fur into stored heat, and every stitch becomes a small defiance against the cold. Morning does not arrive so much as seep reluctantly into the cracks. You wake before the sun has properly committed to the idea of existing. The longhouse is dark, the fire low, the air colder than it was when you fell asleep, and the room full of small human noise. Someone coughs, someone shifts under a cloak. A child mutters in a dream. A dog sighs with the exhausted seriousness of an animal that has contributed absolutely nothing to the firewood situation. For a few moments, you lie still and listen. Outside, wind combs along the roof, snow presses softly against the walls. Somewhere near the animal end of the building, a cow breathes, slow and damp, as if the world is nothing but hay. Patience, and the occasional disappointment of being milked. Your own breath feels cool at first, then warmer where your blanket traps it. The body resists leaving its little pocket of heat. This is not laziness, this is biology filing a formal complaint. But winter work does not wait for comfort. Someone rises first, you hear the scrape of feet on the floor, the rustle of wool, the careful stirring of embers. A person kneels by the hearth and coaxes the fire back from its red sleep. Ash shifts, a coal glows. Dry kindling is placed with tenderness almost romantic enough for a poem. If the poem were about not freezing to death before breakfast, breath is blown gently. A thread of smoke curls up, then a small flame appears. The room seems to remember itself. In the Viking age, daily work on farms did not vanish during winter. It changed shape. Fields might sleep under frost. But the household remains busy with feeding animals, hauling water, chopping fuel, repairing tools, grinding grain, cooking, spinning, weaving, mending, cleaning, and planning for the warmer months. This is one of those plain truths that corrects the fantasy of winter as a long medieval vacation. There is no vacation. There is only different work with colder fingers. You sit up and pull your layers around you. The first task is simply becoming a functioning person. Clothing must be shaken out, wrapped, tied, fastened. Shoes must be found. A missing shoe in a dark longhouse is a small tragedy, especially if it has been used as a pillow by a dog. You put your feet down and feel the chill through the floor. The earth holds the night. The doorway opens, and grey morning slides in. It is not bright. Northern winter daylight can be brief and weak. Depending on latitude, in parts of the Scandinavian world, the day may be only a narrow band of usefulness between long dark hours. Even farther south, winter light is low and fleeting. People measure tasks by it. What must be done outside? What can wait for firelight? What needs both hands and eyes? What can be done by touch after sunset? The day is a small purse, and everyone knows there are only a few coins in it. You step outside with the bundle of wood to carry or an empty bucket to fill, and the cold receives you with unnecessary enthusiasm. The yard is blue-grey. Snow squeaks underfoot. The sky is pale at the horizon, dark above, and the first light turns roof frost into a dull silver. Smoke climbs from the roof hole and then flattens in the wind. Your nose stings, your eyes water. Else, you briefly consider returning indoors forever, which is not an approved economic strategy. The farm is already moving. Someone heads toward the animals with hay. Someone else checks a fence where snow has drifted high. A child carries kindling in both arms, proud and miserable at the same time. An older person stands near the doorway giving instructions, which is the ancient right of people who have already learned the hard lessons and now distribute them as weatherproof wisdom. Water is one of the morning's great concerns, if a stream runs nearby. Reaching it may involve breaking ice, clearing snow, and carrying heavy buckets back uphill because history enjoys cardio. If there is a well, the cover may be frozen, the rope stiff, the bucket rim icy. Snow can be melted, but that costs fuel, and fuel is precious. Every warm thing is connected to something else. Drink water, cooking water, washing water, animal water. None of it comes from a tap. The modern tap is a miracle we insult by leaving it running while brushing our teeth. In 1011, the tap would be worshipped briefly and then assigned a legal status. A lesser-known detail from farm life in cold regions is that snow itself could be useful in household routines, not only as future water, but as a cleaning aid. Packed snow can help scour certain surfaces or cool stored items, though nobody here is pretending it makes laundry delightful. Imagine rubbing a vessel clean with snow while your fingers go numb. Very refreshing, very character building. Perhaps too much character. You carry what you're told to carry. Wood bites into your arms. A bucket handle digs into your hand. The cold makes every object harder and more stubborn. Leather stiffens. Rope scratches. Metal burns the skin with cold if touched carelessly. Even simple tasks become negotiations with material. Nothing wants to bend. Back inside, grain is being prepared. Someone takes a hand quern, the 2 stone pieces used for grinding grain into meal, and begins the slow, circular labour. Stone grinds against stone with a low, rough sound. The rhythm is steady, almost soothing, until you remember that this is hard work repeated day after day. The smell of crushed grain rises, dry and dusty. Tiny particles cling to the hands. Meal means porridge. Bread, ale, survival. The sound of grinding is the sound of breakfast before breakfast exists. Experts still disagree about exactly how winter labour was divided in every region and household, especially between free family members, servants, and enslaved people. The sagas give stories. Law codes give rules. Archaeology gives tools and spaces, but the lived rhythm of a poor farm, a wealthy estate, an Icelandic homestead, or a Danish settlement could differ greatly still. The pattern before you is clear enough. Work follows need. Age, skill, gender expectations, status, and urgency. If something must be done before the light goes, someone does it. You help carry fodder. The hay smells sweet and dusty, a memory of summer trapped in dry stems. Animals push their noses toward it, impatient and warm. Their breath clouds the air, A sheep nudges your leg with mild entitlement. The cattle are large in the dimness, their hides thick, their eyes glossy, their bodies produce heat, dung, milk when available, and endless chores. You begin to see why livestock are both wealth and workload. Owning animals means never having a truly free morning. Outside again. Firewood must be brought closer. Perhaps wood has been stacked under a cover. Perhaps branches must be dragged from a pile. Perhaps peat blocks or other fuel are used depending on the region. The household consumes heat constantly. A cold day can eat through fuel with frightening appetite. You stack pieces near the entrance, careful to keep them dry. Wet fuel smokes badly and burns poorly, and since the longhouse is already smoky enough to season your lungs, nobody wants more. As daylight strengthens, other tasks begin. A broken strap is repaired, a knife is sharpened, cloth is inspected for tears. A child is sent to sweep old straw from a corner, and does so with the tragic air of a prince unjustly exiled. Someone checks stored food for spoilage or gnaw marks. Mice are tiny winter raiders, and unlike human raiders, they do not even bring silver. There is no dramatic soundtrack, only the dense music of necessity. Scrape, grind, cough, stamp, crack, sigh, stir. The day is short, but it is full. You begin to feel the winter household not as a place of waiting, but as a machine made of people. Animals, fuel, food and habit. Each person turns a small wheel, each task connects to another. If the water is not brought, the pot does not boil. If the wood is not dry, the fire fails. If the animals are not fed, spring weakens before it begins. By late morning, the sun has climbed just enough to cast a tired light across the yard. Snow glitters in patches. Your hands ache despite the mittens. Your shoulders know the weight of wood and water. You return through the low doorway with cold clinging to your clothes, and the longhouse receives you again, smoky, crowded, and almost kind. The fire snaps. Someone makes room on the bench without looking up. The quern turns, the pot warms. Outside, daylight is already spending itself, and there is still much to do before darkness gathers the farm back into its narrow circle of fire. The animals are not background to winter. They are the other half of the household, breathing behind walls, shifting in straw, eating the summer that humans cut and stored for them one hard armful at a time. You move toward their end of the longhouse, or perhaps into a connected byre just beyond the main living space, depending on the farm's design. Either way, the distance between human sleep and animal breath is small. You can hear them even when you cannot see them. A hoof scrapes, a chain or tether knocks softly against wood. A sheep coughs in a surprisingly human way, which is not comforting. The air grows wetter and warmer, filled with the thick smell of hides, dung, hay, urine, milk, and warm bodies. Your nose tries to resign, but there is nowhere for it to send the letter. Cattle stand broad and dim in the half-light. Their winter coats look rough, their sides moving slowly. A cow turns her head and looks at you with the deep calm of an animal that has seen generations of human fuss and found most of it unnecessary. Sheep cluster together, wool dense and slightly matted. Goats, if the household keeps them, appear more restless, clever in the way that suggests they are already planning a minor crime. Somewhere a horse stamps, not as a dramatic warhorse from a saga, but as a living investment that needs feed, grooming, shelter, and careful attention through the hardest season. One well-supported reality of Viking-age farm life is that livestock was central to household wealth. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, horses, poultry, and dogs all served practical purposes, though the exact mix depended on region, status, and environment. Animals provided milk, wool, meat, hides, traction, transport, manure, alarm, companionship, and future breeding. They were not pets in the modern sentimental sense, though affection surely existed. They were wealth that could get sick, wander off, kick you, or deal you. at the worst possible moment. Which makes them very much like a savings account with hooves and moods. You help scatter hay, and the smell rises sweet and dusty. It is the smell of summer trapped indoors, of fields cut when light lasted long and insects hummed in the grass. Every mouthful was earned months earlier. Someone had to mow with a scythe or sickle, turn the grass, dry it, gather it, stack it, protect it from rain, and bring it under cover. Now the animals pull it into their mouths with slow, tearing sounds. They do not know they're eating July. You do. Fodder is counted carefully. Too much given now may mean too little later. Too little given now weakens animals before spring. This balance is one of winter's crueler arithmetic lessons. The cattle need enough to live. The sheep need enough to carry wool and lambs. The horse, if kept through winter, must not lose too much strength. Even the dog needs scraps or bones. Though the dog may behave as if it personally invented hunger, there is still discussion among archaeologists and agricultural historians about how often Viking-age livestock were kept inside the same roof as people through deep winter. Compared with separate byres or regional arrangements shaped by climate and building tradition, excavated longhouses sometimes show spaces that appear suited to animals, with drains, stalls or dung layers, but not every farm worked the same way. You can sense the practical logic either way. Animals indoors give heat and protection. Animals indoors also give smell, damp, parasites, and the exciting possibility of being stepped on while half asleep. A child comes in carrying a small bundle of straw and immediately receives correction on how to spread it properly. Winter teaches children through repetition and mild humiliation. Straw must be placed where animals lie, where wetness collects, where hooves need footing. Bedding is comfort, cleanliness, insulation, and manure management all in one. Nothing in this farm has only one purpose. Even waste has a future. Dung mixed with bedding becomes fertilizer. The summer field is already being fed by winter's stink. That is not poetic in the scented candle way, but it is deeply true. You watch someone check a cow's udder, another person examine a sheep's hoof, and someone else inspect a tether. The work is quiet, close, and physical. Hands move over hides, feel for swelling, warmth, injury, roughness. In a world without modern veterinary care, observation is medicine's first tool. You notice changes because you must. A dull eye, a cough, a limp, a failure to eat. Oh, any of these can become serious. The animal cannot explain. It only stands, shifts, breathes, and waits for people to understand. An unusual detail from Norse and wider northern farm practice is that animals sometimes received names that reflected personality, colour, markings, or usefulness. And later Icelandic sources preserve livestock names with the same delight humans have always taken in naming creatures. A cow might not be just the cow to the people who milk her through winter. She might be known for a white forehead, a stubborn temper, a generous yield, or the habit of knocking over buckets like a professional nuisance. History often records kings more eagerly than cows, but the cows did more for breakfast. The sheep draw your attention next. Their wool is future clothing, blankets, sailcloth in some contexts, trade goods, and household work. A living sheep is not merely potential meat. It is a yearly harvest walking around on four thin legs. Different breeds and regions produce different fibres. Some wool is soft, some coarse, some better for outer garments, some for finer work. The women and men who handle it know these differences by touch, not by reading a label at a craft store. They can feel usefulness in a fleece. Goats are hardier in certain environments, able to browse where cattle cannot. They provide milk, meat, hides, horn, and chaos. Pigs, when present, can forage in warmer seasons and eat scraps, but winter feeding may be a burden. Poultry scratch and complain if they are kept. Dogs guard, herd, hunt, and sleep. close to warmth with impressive entitlement, cats where they are present, patrol for mice and perhaps accept human admiration as tribute. The farm is an ecosystem, not a stage set. You notice the danger too. Horns, hooves, teeth, cramped spaces, slick floors, and human fatigue make accidents easy. A kick from a cow can break bone, a horse can crush a foot. An angry boar is not a charming rustic detail. Even a small goat can weaponize stupidity. People who work with animals know their temperaments and still do not fully control them. Winter adds dimness, cold hands, and slippery ground to every chore. Survival depends partly on not being foolish around creatures larger than your confidence. Milk, when available, is precious in deep winter. Not every animal is producing. Dairy cycles depend on breeding and management. The household must plan for fresh milk, stored butter, cheese, sour milk, and the needs of calves or kids. You imagine a cow calving in cold weather. The household suddenly alert, tense, hopeful. A calf means future wealth, but also risk. Birth is never routine when warmth is scarce and death knows the barn door. The animals also bring insects and parasites. Lice, fleas, mites, and other small companions do not respect human dignity. Warm, crated spaces are useful to them too. Combs, grooming, smoke, cold, and cleaning may help, but nobody here enjoys the sterile fantasy of modern life. You scratch your neck just thinking about it. Maybe it is nothing. Maybe it is history moving in. As the morning passes, the byre settles, the animals chew, their jaws move sideways in slow patience. Steam rises from their backs. A sheep leans into another sheep and becomes part of a woolly wall. The cow exhales, and the breath warms your hand for a second. It is intimate in a practical way. You are not separate from these creatures. Your food, clothing, field fertility, transport, trade, and status pass through their bodies. When you return toward the human side, the smell follows you. Woven into your clothes, there is no escaping it. The longhouse itself is a mingled creature now, part human, part animal, part smoke, part hay, part ash. Outside, winter strips the world down to bare forms. Inside, life crowds close because distance is expensive. You sit near the hearth again and hear the animals behind you, chewing the stored summer into heat. Strength, dung, milk, wool, and hope. Their breathing is another kind of fire, slower than flame, less bright, but just as necessary. The household listens to it without noticing, the way you listen to your own heartbeat, trusting that as long as it continues, spring remains possible. The hearth becomes the centre again as the day folds inward, and you notice how everything in the longhouse seems to lean toward it. Not dramatically. No one announces that fire is sacred and essential, because everyone already knows. The oldest truths are often the least theatrical. People simply move closer when cold settles into the walls. They stretch their hands toward the glow, turn damp shoes near the heat, hang cloth where smoke can reach it, and slide pots over embers with the casual precision of long practice. The fire is not just something in the room, it is the room's pulse. You sit where your face warms and your back cools, learning the old winter dance of turning yourself like bread. Too close, and your skin prickles. Too far, and the cold creeps back through wool and bone. The hearth gives unevenly, which means everyone must negotiate with it. Children are warned not to tumble into it. Dogs are nudged away from sparks. Someone pushes a log inward with a blackened stick. Ash collapses with a soft sigh, sending up a brief constellation of orange points. In many Viking Age houses, an open hearth ran along the central floor space, providing heat, light, and the place where food was cooked. Tools were warmed, and evening life gathered. Smoke escaped through roof openings or gaps, though escaped is a generous word. Much of it wandered through the room first. blackening rafters and flavouring everything from hair to porridge. Your eyes sting again. The smoke finds you personally, as if you owe it money. Still, the household accepts this bargain. Smoke preserves food hanging above. Smoke discourages some insects, at least in theory. Smoke dries damp clothing, though it may also make that clothing smell as if it has strong opinions about trees. The fire cooks supper, warms water, hardens glue, softens wax, lights faces, and offers something to look at when darkness makes the walls feel closer. It is inconvenience and salvation together. A smoky little monarch ruling from the floor. You watch a woman adjust the pot with a hooked iron or wooden tool. The stew inside thickens slowly. Its surface trembles with barley, peas, scraps of meat, perhaps cabbage or greens, preserved from earlier months. Steam mingles with smoke overhead. The smell is comforting, even if the room is not clean by modern standards. Comfort is not always cleanliness. Sometimes comfort is the knowledge that the pot is not empty. A man near the fire warms the edge of a tool before working on it. Another person dries leather near the heat, careful not to scorch it. Someone trims a wick in a small lamp. Someone else twists thread, the motion nearly invisible in the low light. You begin to see that firelight organises skill. It chooses what can be done after sunset. Big outdoor labour belongs to the brief day. Smaller, close work belongs to the glow mending. Carving, braiding, sharpening, sorting, telling, remembering. There is a curious practical detail in old fire management that feels almost too humble to mention. Yet it mattered daily. Embers could be banked under ash to keep a fire alive overnight, saving the trouble and risk of kindling a new flame from nothing each morning. A sleeping fire is tended like a small animal. Cover it too much and it dies. Leave it too open, it burns out in the morning. Someone must wake it with dry fuel and breath. You can almost admire the romance of it, until you remember that failing means a cold breakfast and everyone silently judging your ash technique. Fire making itself is a skill, flint and steel, iron strikers, tinder fungus, charred material, dry fibres, and patient hands may be used. The modern match would look like sorcery or at least suspiciously convenient laziness. Here, flame has a biography. It comes from preparation. Good tinder must be kept dry. A spark must be caught. A coal must be coaxed. You do not demand fire, you persuade it. The room darkens outside the hearth's reach. Faces float in amber light. Eyes shine. Smoke softens edges. The rafters seem higher and lower at once, looming above while the air presses down. If you look toward the roof hole, you can see smoke sliding upward in layers, thinning into the cold above. Sometimes snowflakes may fall through vents or gaps and vanish before touching the fire. The house is not sealed from the world. It breathes with it, sometimes against its will. Researchers remain divided on how severe the long-term health effects of hearth smoke were for Viking-age households, especially women, children, elders, and others who spent many hours indoors. Some skeletal and archaeological evidence points to hard lives marked by respiratory strain, while other interpretations warn against painting every smoky house as constant misery. Sitting here, with your throat tightening slightly and your eyes watering, you can appreciate both caution and discomfort. The fire keeps you alive. It also irritates every soft surface you own. The children drift closer as evening deepens. One of them pokes ash with a stick until an adult removes the stick without needing to speak. Another watches sparks rise with sleepy fascination. Fire has always been a storyteller even before words begin. It changes shape constantly. It eats wood, reveals faces, hides corners, and turns ordinary pauses into something deeper. You stare into it too, because people have been doing that for longer than anyone can write down. Above the heat, smoked food hangs in the darkness. Fish, meat, perhaps sausages or strips of flesh depending on region and means. The smoke keeps touching them, day after day, giving flavour and preservation. It also touches the roof beams, making them glossy black with soot. In excavations, traces of burnt wood, hearth placement, ash deposits, and smoke-darkened structures help reveal how houses worked. Fire leaves records because it cannot help itself. It writes in charcoal. Someone begins to cough, quietly at first, then more deeply. No one panics, it is a familiar sound. A cup is passed. The person drinks, clears the throat, and leans back. You feel the human cost folded into this warmth. The longhouse is not a cosy cabin scene without consequences. It is a compromise built by people who know the alternatives are worse. Outside is frost, wind, and darkness. Inside is smoke, crowding, and survival. The choice is not difficult, but it is not gentle either. The fire also shapes time. It must be fed at intervals. It marks the stages of cooking. It burns high for work and low for sleep. It gathers people at night, then becomes embers, then must be revived. In a season when daylight is miserly, fire extends the day just enough, not into brightness, not into modern productivity. Thank goodness, but into useful shadow. Winter evenings become possible because flame lends a little time back. A pot is lifted aside. Bowls are filled again. People eat in the orange half dark, and smoke curls over their heads like a low-weather system. Someone laughs at a remark from the far bench. Someone near you rubs tired eyes. The dog settles with its nose on its paws, perfectly placed to trip anyone carrying food. Very strategic, very ancient. You think of the firewood outside, the axes, the sore shoulders, the drying stacks, the worry of running short. Every warm moment in this room has been purchased in advance. The flame looks light and lively, but behind it stand hours of labour. Cut wood, carried wood, stored wood, protected wood, in treeless places, peat cut and dried, dung shaped and saved, driftwood gathered from shorelines. Heat is not a setting, heat is a supply chain with frost on it. As the evening sinks deeper, the household gradually quiets. The central hearth lowers from flame to glow. Shadows lengthen across sleeping spaces. Someone banks the fire, drawing ash carefully over the embers, preparing tomorrow's warmth while tonight is still alive. The act is small, almost tender. You see then that winter survival is made of such gestures, covering coals, saving sparks, keeping one more breath of heat hidden under grey ash. You lie back near the wall, smoke in your hair, warmth on your face, cold waiting at the edges. The fire mutters softly in its sleep. Above you, black beams vanish into darkness. Around you, the longhouse breathes, coughs, shifts and settles, and beneath the ash, a red heart remains, guarded through the night so morning will not have to begin from nothing. By the time the next grey morning passes into another dim afternoon, you begin to feel how winter shrinks the world beyond the farm. The paths are still there. Technically, the old tracks between settlements, the routes through woodland, the ways down toward the shore, the road to a trading place or chieftain's hall, but snow changes the meaning of distance. Ice edits the map. A stream that was easy to cross in summer may now be a hard white seam, safe in one place, treacherous in another. A familiar hollow can fill with drifted snow deep enough to swallow a boot, a leg, or your remaining enthusiasm for travel. You stand outside the longhouse and look toward the track that leaves the farm. It is not empty. Nothing useful is ever completely empty. A sledge has passed recently, leaving twin lines in the packed snow. Footprints show where someone came from a neighbouring holding. A dog has investigated the prints with professional intensity. Still, the track feels quieter than it would in the busy months. There are no carts rattling over dry ground, no steady coming and going of traders, craftsmen, messengers, guests, and distant relatives arriving at inconvenient times with wet cloaks and strong opinions. Trade does not stop completely in winter, but it slows, narrows, and becomes more deliberate in the Viking world. Major trading centres such as Hedeby, Birka, Kaupang, Dublin, and York connected goods, people, and information across huge distances. By 1011, some older centres had changed or declined, while others remained active in shifting ways and regional markets, ports, and local exchange continued to matter. Silver, cloth, furs, fish, iron, amber, slaves, tools, grain, and wax, and luxury goods could move through these networks. Yet in deep winter, every journey asks a harder question. Is this worth the cold? You follow a man from the farm as he prepares to visit a nearby household, not a grand expedition, just a necessary winter errand. A tool needs repair, news need checking, perhaps a small exchange must be made. He wraps himself in wool, secures a pouch at his belt, checks his knife, and takes a staff. Another person gives instructions that may be advice or criticism, depending on your generosity. He grunts. This is the ancient language of people leaving the house while others worry about them. You go with him in imagination, or perhaps in the slow dream logic of this winter story. The path crunches beneath your feet. Trees stand bare and dark, their branches holding little shelves of snow. The air carries the faint resin smell of pine, the iron smell of frost, and the distant smoke of another farmstead. You pass low fences nearly hidden under drifts here and there. Someone has marked the way with branches or familiar stones. Because a path in snow can vanish under fresh weather, the land you know in summer can become a stranger overnight. Markets in this season are not always bustling open squares. Exchange may happen at a neighbour's hearth, at a winter gathering, at a hall, along a route when travellers meet, or at a port where conditions allow. A piece of iron can be traded for food. Cloth can settle a debt. A promise can move where no coin does. Silver matters, especially in weighed fragments, rings, coins, and hack silver. In much of the Viking Age, value often lies not in stamped currency alone, but in weight, purity, trust, and context. A coin from England, the Islamic world, or elsewhere may be appreciated less for its kingly portrait than for the silver it contains. The face on it can be interesting, certainly, but the scale is the real critic. One odd winter habit that appears in northern travel traditions is the use of skis and snowshoes in some regions, especially where deep snow made ordinary walking miserable or impossible. Archaeological readings show that skis were known in Scandinavia long before 1011, so while not every Viking farmer is gliding gracefully through the forest like a medieval sports advertisement, some people in snowy regions could move over winter landscapes with equipment designed for it. You, however, are probably falling over immediately, very peaceful, very dignified. A raven will remember. The man you accompany carries not only goods, but curiosity. News is a kind of trade too. Who has died? Who has married? Who has enough? Hay? Who has lost animals? Has a ship been seen? Has someone returned from England? Is silver moving? Has a local leader called men together? Are there rumours of law cases, feuds, taxes, tribute, or church matters in a world without newspapers or glowing screens? Information travels in mouths, across benches, beside fires, through those travellers who are fed partly because they know things. The neighbouring farm appears slowly through the trees, first as smoke, then as roofline, then as the dark mouth of a doorway. Dogs bark, a person comes out, squinting. Recognition relaxes the body, hospitality begins, but not without assessment. Visitors bring news, but they also bring appetite. In winter, even friendship may glance at the pantry. Inside, the talk is careful at first. Cloaks steam near the fire. A small item is unwrapped, perhaps a broken buckle. A knife needing a new handle, a length of woven cloth, a packet of salt, a bead, a comb, a scrap of iron, a little silver weighed in the palm. The object seems small, but its journey may be long. That bead might have crossed seas. That coin might have come from an English payment or a distant market. That scrap of silk, if such luxury reaches this place, may have travelled farther than anyone in the room ever will. The Viking Age's local smoke and global reach, all in the same breath. Specialists continue to question how deeply international trade goods penetrated ordinary rural households, rather than remaining concentrated among elites, traders, and major settlements. Excavated finds can surprise us, with foreign coins, beads, weights, and ornaments appearing far from obvious centres. Yet absence of evidence is tricky. A poor farm might see little beyond local exchange, while another household connected to raiding. Service or trade might handle objects from half the known world. You sit by this borrowed hearth and understand that ordinary is not a simple category. Ordinary people can touch extraordinary networks through one coin. One story, one returning traveller with salt in his pouch and lies in his mouth. The conversation turns to prices, though not always in the way modern people expect. Worth can be negotiated through custom, weight, need, season, and relationship. In summer, a tool might have one value. In winter, when repair is urgent and travel is difficult, it may feel different. Debt can bind households together or sour them quietly. Gifts may create obligation. A generous host gains honour, but a reckless one empties the storehouse. Even kindness has bookkeeping. Outside, the light begins to fade far too early. The visitor must decide whether to return or stay. Weather chooses for people more often than pride admits. A dark cloud over the hills, a rising wind, a smell of snow in the air. These can end a negotiation faster than any insult. The host offers a place near the fire if needed. The guest weighs the road against the room, the food against the risk, the desire to be home against the stupidity of freezing in a ditch for the sake of punctuality. You return along the path before full dark, carrying perhaps a repaired object, a message, or simply more knowledge than you had that morning. Snow begins to fall, fine as sifted flour. The world softens around you. Each footprint behind you starts to blur. You think of ships locked away, markets muted, silver hidden, roads narrowed, and still, somehow, movement continuing. Winter does not erase exchange. It makes every exchange more deliberate. When the longhouse smoke appears ahead, it feels like a landmark of civilization itself. You step inside with cold on your cloak and news in your mouth. Heads turn and someone asks what was heard, someone asks whether the tool was mended. Someone asks, more quietly, whether the neighbour's hay will last. You settle near the hearth as the story of the errand becomes part of the evening. Goods have moved a little. Gossip has moved farther. The world beyond the farm has not vanished after all. It is only travelling slowly, wrapped in wool, following tracks through snow, and arriving with numb fingers at the door. The news you carry in from the neighbouring farm does not stay harmless for long. At first it is only talk, soft and practical, shared over the fire while snow melts from cloaks and people lean closer to catch the details. A fence has fallen near the boundary meadow. A cow has gone lame. A man from farther down the valley says a debt is still unpaid. Someone claims a cousin was insulted at a gathering before the first heavy snow. Someone else says the insult was deserved, which is always a soothing contribution to community peace. You sit on the bench and feel how quickly winter's quiet can tighten around matters of honour, property, and memory. Snow muffles the fields, but it does not muffle grievance. If anything, darkness gives old arguments more time to sit indoors with everyone, warming their hands at the same fire like unwelcome guests. Law in the Viking Age is not a distant building with polished floors and a clerk telling you to take a number. It is social, spoken, remembered, negotiated, and performed before people whose opinions matter. Across the Norse world, Assemblies known as things served as places where free people could settle disputes, hear laws, make judgments, arrange compensation, confirm alliances, and display power. The form varied by region, and some assemblies were grand while others were local, but the idea is clear law lives in gatherings, in voices, and in reputation. Of course, in deep winter. Gathering is harder. Snow blocks routes, rivers freeze or half-freeze in dangerous ways. People do not travel unless the matter is worth the effort. Yet disputes do not politely wait for spring, they simmer. They are discussed at hearths carried by visitors shaped by older relatives, and sometimes cooled by practical minds who know that feuding in winter is inefficient, expensive, and frankly terrible for indoor morale. Tonight, an argument grows from the talk. It begins over a boundary, or perhaps a borrowed animal, or a debt of silver. Hay, or labour. The exact object almost matters less than the pride around it. One man says the neighbouring household cut hay from land that was not theirs. Another says the line was always disputed. An older woman reminds them that her father settled this before either of them had beards worth noticing. Nobody enjoys that part, because ancestral memory is a powerful weapon when wielded by someone who also knows where the food stores are. Property matters intensely. Land is not just dirt, it is grazing hay. Fuel rights, water, inheritance, marriage prospects, status, and survival. A narrow strip of meadow can mean more winter fodder. More fodder can mean more animals alive in spring. More animals alive in spring can mean milk, wool, calves, lambs, and social standing. So when modern ears hear boundary dispute, they should not imagine two neighbours fussing over a decorative hedge. They should imagine the difference between comfort and hunger, wearing snow boots. Compensation is often preferable to revenge, at least when sensible people can force everyone to be sensible. In many Germanic and Norse legal traditions, injuries, killings, insults, and property losses could be addressed through payments, settlements, oaths, and negotiated agreements. The goal is not always forgiveness in the soft modern sense. It is containment, if harm is answered by alarm forever. Households bleed wealth and people until nobody can remember who began it, though everyone remains very confident their side was right. The uncertainty that still occupies legal historians concerns how evenly these legal ideals worked across rank and region. A free farmer with kin and standing might press a claim effectively. A poorer person, a woman without strong support, a servant, or an enslaved person could face very different realities. Law may speak of order, but power always leans over its shoulder. Sitting here, listening to the household weigh a dispute, you can feel that law is not separate from who has allies, who has weapons, who has silver, who has memory, and who can endure the winter without borrowing grain. The household leader speaks slowly, not loudly. Loudness can be useful, but calm can be sharper. He asks who witnessed the cutting of hay. He asks when the boundary was last walked. He asks whether compensation was offered. He asks whether anyone has carried this story farther than necessary, because gossip is a sledge with no brakes once it starts downhill. A younger man bristles. He wants action, the satisfying kind that comes before consequences. An older man coughs and says action may wait until the paths open. This is not cowardice. This is weather-based wisdom. An odd little piece of Norse legal culture now comes to mind. Insults could be legally serious, especially if they challenge courage, masculinity, honour, or social standing. Words were not always treated as empty air. Certain accusations could demand response, compensation, or formal handling. So yes, in this world, calling someone the wrong thing at the wrong time might become more expensive than breaking a fence. Medieval comment sections would have bankrupted entire valleys. You watch faces in firelight. A young woman listens while mending cloth, eyes lowered but attention sharp. A child pretends to sleep and fails completely. A dependent worker shifts near the wall, quiet, but because this is not a discussion where every voice carries equal weight. The dispute belongs to everyone in consequence, but not everyone in authority. If the household loses hay or honour, all may feel the result. If men travel to settle it, others cover the work. If compensation is paid, stores may shrink. If violence follows, grief enters through the door and sits down permanently. Honour is not vanity here, it is a form of protection. A household known to accept insult or theft too easily may invite more pressure. A household too quick to violence may lose allies. The balance is delicate. You must appear strong enough to deter harm, wise enough to settle it, generous enough to gain respect, and dangerous enough that fools think twice. Simple, really. Just manage the emotional economy of an entire armed community while also worrying about hay mould. Outside, snow keeps falling. The world looks soft, but the talk inside is edged. Names of kin are mentioned. Past favours are counted. Old marriages are recalled. Someone remembers that the neighbour once lent an ox during ploughing. Someone else remembers that the same neighbour kept a borrowed tool too long. History in a small community is never past. It is stored like grain and brought out when useful. Eventually, the room moves toward a practical conclusion. No one will travel tonight. A message may be sent when weather clears. Witnesses will be asked. A settlement might be proposed. Perhaps hay returned, labour exchanged, silver weighed. An apology shaped carefully enough not to humiliate anyone beyond repair. The younger man is not satisfied. That may be the point. Satisfaction is not always the goal. Survival is. The fire lowers while the matter remains alive. You realise that winter does not suspend law. It thickens it. With people indoors, disputes become stories rehearsed again and again, polished by anger or softened by fatigue. By the time an assembly meets, everyone may already know 5 versions of the truth. The formal judgment will matter, so will the winter talk that prepares it. You lean back against the wall and listen as the household drifts into quieter conversation. The boundary, the hay, the insult, the old settlement, all of it hangs in the smoky air with the drying fish and blackened beams. In 1011, justice is not clean or swift. It is human, local, weather-delayed, memory-heavy, and deeply concerned with what people can afford to lose. Beyond the door, the snow covers tracks for now, but beneath it, paths remain. When thaw comes, people will walk them to assemblies, to neighbours, to settlements, to feasts, perhaps to fights if wisdom fails, for tonight. The law sleeps uneasily beside the hearth, wrapped in wool, waiting for morning like everyone else by the time the dispute quiets. The children have learned more than the adults intended to teach. They are scattered around the longhouse in the loose arrangement of tired young bodies everywhere. One child leans against a sleeping dog, using its ribs as a pillow and receiving only the occasional offended twitch. Another sits near the hearth, watching a twist of wool become thread between older fingers. A smaller one has finally surrendered to sleep, mouth open, hair tangled. One hand still curled around a little carved scrap as if guarding treasure. The room has grown softer, but not silent. Children make silence impossible, even when unconscious. Winter presses them indoors more than summer does. In the warm months, they would run between yard, field, shore, pasture, and woodland, trailing after adults, fetching, watching, learning, getting in the way with impressive commitment. Now the world outside is still available, but only in pieces. A brief burst in the snow, a chore with an adult, a slippery path to the animals, then back inside. Cheeks red, mittens damp, noses running, energy still buzzing in them like trapped bees. You watch a boy grind grain under supervision. His arms are too small for the work, and the hand quern seems to mock him with its patient weight. Stone turns over stone. The sound is low and rough. a winter rhythm older than the house. He complains once, not loudly enough to be punished, just loudly enough to place his suffering on record. An older woman tells him to keep the motion steady. He does, for 5 heroic seconds, then speeds up, slows down, and receives another correction. Childhood in 1011 is not separate from labour. It is an apprenticeship to being useful. Viking-age children were expected to help with household tasks according to age, strength, and status. They might carry kindling, tend animals, fetch water, watch younger siblings, sort wool, grind grain, gather small fuel, learn simple craft work, and listen closely to adult decisions. There is no long protected bubble of modern childhood here, though that does not mean there is no affection. Love simply wears practical clothing. A child is cherished, scolded, trained, fed, and put to work because the household needs hands, and because one day those hands must know what to do without being told. A girl near the loom has been given wool to tease apart. She sits with a seriousness that would make a monk jealous. Her fingers pull fibres loose, separating tangles, preparing them for spinning. She glances often at the woman beside her, copying the angle of the wrist, the pace, the little flicks and twists. This is how knowledge passes, not through manuals, not through bright diagrams, but through watching until the body understands, no one says. Welcome to your structured textile learning module, mercifully. Another child is sent to the animal end with straw. The child moves too quickly, slips slightly, recovers, and looks around to see if anyone noticed. Everyone noticed, no one comments. This may be kindness, or simply fatigue. From behind the partition comes the wet warmth of cattle breath and the rustling of sheep. The child spreads bedding badly, then better, then gets told to move it away from the damp corner. Winter teaches through repetition. It also teaches that animals do not care about your personal growth. Games exist too. You see small objects passed between hands' knuckle bones. Carved pieces, bits of wood, perhaps counters for a board game. Board games such as Hnefatafl, a strategy game known across the Norse world in different forms, offered entertainment and mental practice, especially for people who valued planning. Traps, and the pleasure of watching a friend make a terrible move. The children may play simplified versions or invent their own games with whatever is available. Pebbles become armies, sticks become ships, a bone becomes a horse, a king, or a monster depending on who is winning. One curious detail from archaeological finds is the presence of miniature objects, including tiny weapons, boats, animals, and tools. Though scholars do not always agree on whether every small item was a child's toy, a ritual object, a model, a teaching piece, or something else entirely. That uncertainty is rather fitting. Children have always turned ordinary things into worlds. An adult sees a carved scrap. A child sees a ship crossing a stormy sea, unless the adult takes it away because it is needed for kindling, which is frankly poor support for imagination. The smallest children live close to danger. Fire, sharp tools, animals, cold, illness, smoke, and hunger all crowd around them. Yet they also live close to many adults. A longhouse is full of eyes, and a child's mistakes are often caught quickly because there is nearly always someone nearby. Privacy is scarce. But so is abandonment within a functioning household. A baby fusses, and one person rocks it while another stirs the pot. A toddler wanders too near the hearth, and a hand appears instantly to pull them back. The hand may be gentle or brisk. Either way, the child remains unroasted, which is the goal. You hear teaching hidden inside stories. An older man speaks of a foolish traveller who ignored weather signs and vanished in a storm. A child asks whether he died. The answer is vague, but the lesson is not. Do not trust a calm sky too easily. Do not walk alone in bad weather. Do not boast before the road. A woman tells of a girl who remembered where food was stored when adults were away. Another lesson. Notice things, know the household, do not assume someone else will think for you. The line between entertainment and instruction is thin. Stories carry maps of behaviour. They teach who to trust, what courage looks like, how greed ends, why can matter, how trolls behave, how neighbours behave, and which is worse. In a smoky room where winter makes the world small, children absorb lore, religion, family history, craft skill, animal care, and social rank almost by breathing. They learn who sits in the honoured place. They learn whose jokes are safe to laugh at. They learn when silence is wiser than honesty, a lesson many adults are still revising. There remains real disagreement among specialists about how emotionally close Viking-age parents were to young children, partly because high child mortality can tempt modern readers into assuming emotional distance. But grave goods, care for sick or disabled children in some societies, later literary tenderness, and plain human experience all warn against easy conclusions. People who lost children often still loved them intensely. Practical hardness and affection are not opposites. Here, you see a mother wipe a child's face with a cloth, muttering about mess, while her hand lingers at the child's cheek. That small gesture says more than a law code. Winter also shapes fear. The dark outside is not empty to a child. It has sounds. Foxes bark, ice cracks, wind makes voices in the roof. Adults speak of spirits, the dead land beings, trolls, omens, saints, gods, and Christian powers depending on household belief and region. A child may not separate all these neatly. Why would they? The world is full of forces, some seen, some not. The longhouse fire becomes an island, and beyond it the shadows are deep enough for anything. Yet children laugh, of course they do. One whispers a joke and is shushed. Another drops a game piece and crawls under the bench to find it, discovering instead something sticky and regrettable. A baby pulls at someone's braid. The dog wakes, sniffs the air, and decides nothing important has happened, unless food is involved. Childhood keeps making small bright sparks in the darks, inconvenient and necessary. As night thickens, the children are gathered into sleeping places. Cloaks become blankets. Bodies curl together for warmth. Someone gets the better spot and is resented. Someone's feet are cold and therefore everyone must hear about it, eventually. The complaints fade, the fire glows low. The adults continue softer talk above the sleeping young, discussing hay, law, food, weather, and spring tasks that these children will one day inherit. You look at their faces in the ember light and understand that Viking winter does not pause childhood. It presses it close to the hearth, gives it chores, stories, hunger, games, smoke, fear, warmth, and memory. These children are not simply waiting to become adults. They are already part of the household survival. Small hands learning the shape of a hard world while snow covers the paths outside. The children sleep, but the work of winter keeps moving through the hands of women. You notice it first in the quiet after the room settles. The loudest chores have ended. The animals have been fed, the bowls have been scraped. The door has been barred against the cold, yet along the benches, beside the sinking hearth. Fingers still move. A woman twists wool into thread. Another mends a torn seam by firelight. Someone checks a storage vessel, then closes it again with the careful firmness of a person who knows exactly how much food remains and exactly how many days still stand between now and grass. Winter does not belong only to axes, boats, and men staring nobly at weather. In the longhouse, winter is held together by people who measure, mend, preserve, soothe, remember, and decide. Much of that burden rests on women, especially in the management of food, cloth, household order, and daily survival. The farm may have a male household head, depending on family structure and status, but inside these walls authority is not a single chair. It is distributed through knowledge. Who knows where the keys are? Who knows which cheese is ready? Who knows which child is feverish? Which sheep may lamb early? which cloth can be cut, which guest can be trusted, which old insult should not be repeated, near which cousin power can sound like a quiet answer from the shadowed bed. You watch the woman with the keys. They hang from her belt, small dark shapes glinting when the fire catches them. Keys in Viking Age women's graves have often been read as symbols of household authority, tied to storage, responsibility, and status. The exact meaning is not always simple, because grave goods can speak in symbols as well as practicalities. Still, the image is strong. A woman carrying access to the household's locked goods, to food stores, chests, cloth, valuables, and the hidden reserves that stand between dignity and desperation. She is not merely guarding objects, she is guarding timing. A winter storehouse can be ruined by generosity as easily as by greed. Open the good butter too soon, and spring becomes thinner. Keep back food too harshly, and workers weaken. Feed a guest well, and honour grows, but stores shrink. Refuse a guest, and reputation suffers, maybe dangerously. Household management is not gentle domestic background. It is strategy performed with ladles, keys, and the patience to say no when everyone wishes the answer were yes. The women speak in low voices, not secretly, but with the privacy that survives even in a crowded room. They discuss wool, perhaps a child's growing body, a torn sleeve, a tub of sour milk, an old woman's cough, and the need to check dried fish for damp. One laughs softly at a memory from summer, and the laugh quickly fades into the fire. Winter laughter is often brief, not because people are grim all the time, but because the room has so many things waiting to be done. The loom stands nearby, its upright frame rising into shadow. Warp-weighted looms were used in the Viking Age, and weaving could produce cloth for clothing, blankets, sails, bags, wall hangings, and trade. The weights at the bottom of the warp threads keep tension, each one a small anchor for the fabric growing above. You run your eyes over the lines of thread and realize that cloth is architecture made soft. It shelters the skin, lines sleeping places, wraps goods, carries babies, marks wealth, and sometimes travels farther than its maker. Textile specialists continue to puzzle over how much of household textile production was done mainly for local use and how much fed wider exchange networks, especially in places connected to sailmaking, trade, or elite demand. The work before you could become a child's tunic, a winter blanket, or part of a ship's equipment someday. A thread made beside this hearth may, by some long chain of need, touch the sea. That is an astonishing thought for something so quiet. The spinning never seems to end. A spindle turns, drops, twists fibre into thread. The motion is graceful when done by skilled hands. When you imagine trying it, the thread immediately becomes either a lumpy disaster or a sad little rope with ambitions. A spindle whirl, often made of stone, clay, bone, or other material, gives weight and balance. Many such whirls survive in archaeological finds. Humble, round reminders of countless hours of women's labour. Kings leave names. Spindles leave economies. An unusual detail from burial finds is that some elite Viking Age women were buried with tools, keys, fine jewellery, imported goods, or even items suggesting ritual or specialist roles, such as staffs that some researchers connect with seeress traditions. Interpretations differ, and one should not turn every woman with a staff into a mysterious sorceress with dramatic lighting still. These finds remind you that women's roles could reach beyond the cooking pot household manager, craft producer, trader, landholder, ritual specialist, storyteller, healer, negotiator, and political actor through kinship and marriage. At the hearth, a woman prepares something medicinal. Perhaps herbs steep in warm water. Perhaps a salve is softened near the fire. The smell shifts, green and bitter under the smoke. Household medicine is not cleanly separated from cooking. religion, and inherited experiment. People use what they know: honey, fats, herbs, wool wrappings, heat, rest, charms, prayers, and experience. Some remedies help, some do nothing. Some help because care itself is powerful, especially when options are few. A baby wakes and whimpers, the woman beside you shifts her mending aside and lifts the child before the sound grows. The movement is automatic, practiced. She rocks without stopping her conversation. Another woman reaches over and tucks a cloth more securely around the child's feet. Nobody announces tenderness, it simply happens, folded between chores. You notice how often women carry memory, genealogy, marriage ties, debts, births, deaths, illnesses, insults, food yields, good years, bad years, who helped during a storm, who failed to help when asked. All of this lives in talk. Men remember too. Of course, but the daily continuity of the household gives women a particular map of social truth. A marriage arrangement may turn on what a woman knows. A dispute may be softened or sharpened by her words. A young person's future may depend on her judgment of another family's character. Winter gives such knowledge time to be rehearsed. Near the storage area, a girl watches the keyhole deer open a chest. Inside a folded cloth, perhaps ornaments, perhaps tools, maybe small valuables wrapped in fabric. The girl's eyes widen. She is learning not only where things are kept, but how importance looks when it is handled. Take out only what is needed. Fold carefully, count silently, close firmly. A household survives partly because someone knows the difference between use and waste. There is also fatigue. You see it in shoulders, in red eyes, in hands roughened by cold water, wool grease, smoke, and work. The calm competence can make the burden invisible if you are not careful. Women hold winter. Yes, but holding is heavy. They do not float through the longhouse as wise decorative figures. They ache, worry, snap, laugh, desire, resent, plan, and keep going. The myth of effortless endurance is just another kind of forgetting. Outside, snow brushes against the walls. Inside, the woman with the keys settles back onto the bench. The chest is closed. The mending continues. A child sighs in sleep. The loom waits for morning. The fire lowers, but hands still move in the glow, pulling thread, tying knots, repairing the fabric of the household one small place at a time. You realize that winter survival in 10 and 11 depends on these quiet acts as much as any voyage or battle. Food lasts because someone measures it. Bodies stay warm because someone makes and repairs cloth. Children grow because someone feeds, teaches, and remembers them. Reputation holds because someone knows which words to speak and which to swallow. The longhouse does not merely shelter women's work, it is built upon it, warmed by it, stitched through with it, until every wall seems to hum with the patient strength of hands that refuse to let the cold win. Beyond the steady work of women, beyond the sleeping children and the quiet authority of keys, there is another kind of winter restlessness moving through the longhouse. You feel it in the men who sit too long with their hands empty. Not all men, of course, many are fully occupied. Sore from chopping wood, hauling fodder, mending fences, tending animals, grinding through the same practical tasks as everyone else. Viking-age men are not made entirely of sword poses and dramatic silhouettes. Most are farmers first, because food does not grow in saga verses. Still, winter traps certain ambitions indoors. It folds the sea away. It stills the oars. It hides the roads. A man who has spent summer rowing, trading, raiding, building, bargaining, harvesting, or attending assemblies now sits under a smoky roof while snow edits the world down to yard, byre, path, and hearth. You watch one of them near the wall, turning a spear shaft slowly in his hands. He is checking it for warping, cracks, roughness. places where the wood has swollen or shrunk in damp cold. Beside him, another man works at a shield rim, scraping and smoothing. A third inspects leather straps, pulling them between fingers, testing whether they remain strong enough to trust. These are not grand actions, but they belong to future movement. Spring is hiding in these repairs. Summer violence, trade, travel, and labour are being prepared beside a winter fire. Weapons in the Viking Age were often owned and maintained by free men, according to wealth and status. Though quality varied enormously, a sword was expensive, prestigious, and far from universal. Spears were more common, axes were useful both as tools and weapons, and shields needed regular care. The myth gives everyone a glittering blade. The farm gives many people a working axe and a serious relationship with maintenance. A chipped edge, a loose rivet, a cracked handle, these are not details. They are possible disaster arriving early. You sit close enough to hear the scrape of a whetstone. The sound is slow, steady, almost calming. Metal whispers against stone. A knife edge brightens in the firelight. A man runs his thumb near, not on, the edge, because he is experienced and still fond of having thumbs. Knives are everywhere in daily life. They cut food, cord, leather, wood, cloth, and sometimes arguments short. A small knife can matter more often than a famous sword. The winter men talk of weather first, because weather is safely irritating. Then animals, then tools, then ships. There it is. The sea entering the longhouse without opening the door. Someone wonders whether a boat stored by the shore has taken damage from ice. Another says the mast must be checked when the thaw begins. Someone mentions tar, rope, sailcloth, oarlocks. The vocabulary of movement warms them more than the fire for a moment. If you follow their thoughts outward, you reach the shoreline, where boats lie drawn up, covered, repaired, or watched anxiously through winter. Viking ships, from small boats to larger longships and cargo vessels, depended on careful woodworking. Iron fastenings or rivets, caulking, tar, rope and sail. They were not disposable adventure platforms. They were wealth floating on water, and winter could harm them even when they did not sail. Ice can crush, damp can rot, wind can tear covers loose, neglect can become expensive. One odd practice tied to boat care and woodworking is the use of animal hair. Wool, moss or plant fibre mixed with tar or other materials for caulking seams, depending on region and tradition. It is not glamorous, but it keeps water out, which is a wonderful feature in a boat. The heroic sea king of later imagination depends, quietly, on somebody stuffing fibres into gaps and smearing sticky black tar with hands that will smell for days. Glory often has a maintenance crew. You see a younger man listening more than speaking. His eyes keep moving to the older men's gear. He wants spring to come because a spring might make him larger in the eyes of others. Perhaps he hopes to join a trading voyage, a raiding party, a lord's retinue, or a fishing crew. Perhaps he wants silver, reputation, stories, or simply escape from the daily humiliation of being told he stacked wood badly. Winter is hard on impatience. It gives his ambition nowhere to run except into fantasy. But the older men are not lost in fantasy. They remember costs. They have seen storms turn skilled sailors into memories. They know that a profitable voyage can also mean hunger for those left behind if labour is absent too long. They know that raiding brings wealth and danger, and that serving a king or great lord can lift a man or swallow him. They know that England in 1011 is not some distant, simple treasure chest. It is a complicated, violent landscape of armies, tribute, resistance, churches, towns, captives and politics. The silver that comes home may carry sorrow in its shine. Debate continues among historians over how ordinary Norse farmers balance seasonal farming obligations with overseas raiding or trading. Was raiding mostly the work of specialist bands, ambitious young men, elite followers, and organised armies? Or could many rural households participate occasionally when opportunity rose? The answer depends on time, place, status, and evidence. Sitting in this smoky hall, you sense the range. Some men are rooted tightly to the farm, others belong partly to the sea, many live between the two, pulled by hunger, wealth, duty, and the restless human desire to be more than cold and tired in one familiar room. The conversation turns to a man not present. He sailed east one year, west another, and came home with a ring, a scar, and a story that changes slightly each time it is told. Someone makes a dry comment about the scar being smaller in summer. Laughter moves through the room, low and brief. The absent man's reputation is present even when he is not. Men build themselves partly from what others say by firelight. Yet winter also exposes dependence. A warrior still needs someone to mend his cloak. A trader still needs grain. A sailor still needs cattle alive in spring. A man dreaming of silver still sleeps under a roof kept warm by shared labour. No one survives as a lone hero for long. The sagas may give you proud individuals, but the winter household gives you networks of need. Every boast has a pantry behind it. Some men work wood through the evening. One carves a handle, another shapes a peg, another repairs a sledge runner. Because not all winter movement waits for roads. The smell of fresh wood curls into the smoke, clean and pale, chips fall onto the floor. A boy watches closely, trying not to appear too eager. A man hands him a scrap and a small tool, then corrects his grip before he removes a piece of himself. Teaching does not stop with women's work or children's chores. Skill is social inheritance, passed in murmurs, scowls, demonstrations, and the occasional insult disguised as advice. There is unease, too. Men who cannot act may become sharp with one another. A joke lands badly. A memory of an insult returns. The law talk from the night before still hovers. Winter confinement can preserve peace by keeping people home. But it can also ferment resentment like a badly sealed tub. The wise ones know when to talk, when to carve, when to step outside and let the cold discipline the temper. You look at their faces in the firelight, young, old, scarred, smooth, bearded, tired, not a single type, farmers, fathers, sons, brothers, dependents, traders, fighters, widowers, fools, careful men, reckless men. Some will leave in spring, some will not. Some want glory, some want enough hay. Some want to repair a hinge and sleep without coughing. History often remembers the ones who cross seas, but winter remembers all of them sitting here, sharpening, waiting, listening to snow. As the fire sinks lower, the spear shaft is set aside, the shield rim rests near the wall. The leather straps are bundled, the whetstone is wrapped carefully. Because tools that maintain tools are precious too. The men settle back into the wider household rhythm, their restlessness not gone, only banked like embers under ash. Outsized. Boats sleep under frost, roads lie hidden. England, silver, markets, assemblies, feuds, and voyages remain beyond the white horizon. Inside, men wait with repaired gear, stiff shoulders, and thoughts that travel farther than their bodies can. Winter holds them in place, but it cannot stop them from preparing for the first opening in the ice, the first soft path. The first morning when the world says, not gently but clearly, move. The men's talk of ships and spring slowly fades, but the room does not become empty of movement. It becomes full of invisible movement instead. You feel it when the fire lowers and people begin watching shadows. Not every glance is practical now. Some are turned toward the places beyond ordinary sight, toward gods, saints, ancestors, land spirits, dreams, omens, luck, and the strange little warnings the world seems to send when nights grow long. Winter does this. It makes the known world smaller and the unseen world larger. When the wind speaks in the roof and snow covers every path, it is easy to believe that more than weather is outside. You sit near the hearth and listen as someone mentions a dream. The voice is casual at first, as if discussing a cracked bucket, but the room tilts its attention. Dreams matter here. Not every dream, perhaps, since even the Viking Age must have had its share of nonsense dreams involving lost shoes and inconvenient goats. Still, some dreams are treated as messages, warnings, glimpses, or burdens. A dead relative appears, a ship breaks apart, a black bird settles on a roof beam, a bright woman stands at a crossroads. People listen, because ignoring such things feels reckless. By 1011, the Norse world is not religiously simple. Christianity has spread widely in Denmark and Norway through royal power. Mission work, trade, politics, and personal conversion, while older Norse beliefs continue in memory, practice, poetry, and household habit in different regions. Iceland had officially accepted Christianity in 1000 here, though older customs did not vanish overnight like smoke through a roof vent. Belief changes unevenly. It lingers in words, gestures, charms, fears, and habits. A household may know Christ, saints, and church bells, while still respecting older powers in the land and weather. Humans are excellent at carrying more than one world in the same mind. Someone crosses themselves before eating, or murmurs a Christian blessing. Another person says nothing, but later touches an amulet at the throat. You notice small objects in the firelight, perhaps a cross pendant, perhaps a Thor's hammer, perhaps a bead or charm whose meaning depends on the wearer. In some archaeological contexts, crosses and hammer pendants have been found in the same broad cultural landscapes, reminding you that conversion is not just a royal announcement. It is lived in jewellery, burial choices, names, songs, and the quiet question of which power you call upon when the child is feverish. The old gods do not appear here as cartoon thunder and tavern shouting. They are more serious than that, and more woven into the world. Odin is wisdom, poetry, death, kingship, danger, and the unnerving price of knowledge. Thor is protection, thunder, strength, and the hammer that guards gods and humans. Frey and Freyja touch fertility, prosperity, desire, war, and magic in ways later storytellers preserve imperfectly. But ordinary belief is not always tidy theology. It may be a prayer before travel, a charm for health, respect at a burial mound, a fear of offending beings in the landscape, a story told so often that it becomes part of the walls. At the edge of the room, an older woman begins speaking about weather signs, not as a grand prophecy, more like practical observation wearing a cloak of mystery. The way the smoke sinks, the look of the moon, the behaviour of animals, the sound of ice in a world dependent on weather. People read the sky the way you might read a message on your phone, except the sky has worse spelling and never apologises. Some signs are good observation, sharpened by generations. Others belong to hope, fear, or pattern-seeking. Usually, they mix. One strange little practice from medieval Scandinavia and neighbouring traditions involves protective markings, charms, or spoken formulas for safety, healing, travel, or childbirth. Some later runic inscriptions ask for help, protection, love, or luck, and a few are wonderfully ordinary in their concerns. People scratched signs onto wood, bone, metal, or stone, sometimes for memory, sometimes for magic, sometimes for ownership, sometimes for sheer human need to leave a mark. Not every rune is a spell, despite what certain dramatic necklaces would like you to believe. Sometimes a rune says a name, sometimes a name is magic enough. The sound of church bells may not reach this isolated farm every day, depending on where you are, but bells belong to the changing northern world. In places with churches nearby, bells mark Christian time, calling people toward worship, prayer, fasting, feasts, and a calendar that overlays older seasonal rhythms. Winter is not only cold, it is Advent, Christmas, saints' days, fasting rules, local customs, and gatherings where Christian ritual reshapes social life. In other places, the bell is absent or distant, and older seasonal practices remain stronger. The Norse world in 1011 is a patchwork, not a single painted shield. There is still lively disagreement among researchers about how quickly deep religious change took root below the level of kings, bishops, and elite monuments. Was conversion for many people sincere and rapid? Or did public Christianity coexist for generations with older household practices, charms, and local understandings? Evidence gives both firmness and blur. Laws can change faster than habits. A king can be baptized in a day. A grandmother's fear of the mound behind the pasture may take longer. You imagine the household at a winter feast. Perhaps there is Christian observance, perhaps older echoes, perhaps both. Meat if available, ale, toasts, blessings, stories of gods now treated as tales by some and truths by others. A man who accepted baptism may still enjoy a poem about Thor. A woman wearing a cross may still know which spring should not be angered. A child may hear of saints in the morning and trolls at night, and not feel any need to organise this neatly for future academics. Children are wise in that way. They let the world be crowded. The dead are also close in winter. Burial mounds may stand under snow outside the settlement, pale humps in the moonlight. Ancestors are not abstract. They are land, inheritance, memory, obligation, and sometimes unease. People may speak of those who came before, not just as names but as presences. The line between remembering the dead and fearing them can be thin when the dark lasts long. Stories of Draugr, restless dead beings in later Norse literature, carry a winter chill even if the exact beliefs varied. Nothing says bedtime like wondering whether Great-Uncle Bjorn is still annoyed in his mound. Very soothing, very healthy for the nerves. Inside the longhouse, someone places a small offering near the fire or speaks a blessing over a cup. You cannot be sure what every gesture means. Neither can modern scholarship. Not always. A gesture may be religious, customary, practical, or all three. Pouring liquid, touching metal, naming a saint, invoking luck, avoiding certain words, these actions blur categories. The past does not label itself for your convenience. The fire pops, a spark rises and vanishes into smoke. People fall quiet for a moment, and the silence feels attentive. Outside, wind moves over the roof. A dog lifts its head, listens, then settles again. That small decision reassures everyone more than they admit. Dogs are not theologians, but they are useful judges of whether a sound requires panic. You sit in the half-dark and realize that belief in this winter is not merely comfort. It is also explanation, protection, social order, and courage. It tells people why storms may come, why luck turns, why a child might recover, why a ship is lost, why an oath matters, why the dead must be honoured, why the world remains meaningful when hunger and cold make it feel indifferent. Whether a person turns to Christ, Thor, Mary, Odin, local spirits, charms, or simply the old habit of watching the moon, they are reaching for a pattern strong enough to hold fear. The longhouse settles deeper into night. A cross glints once, a hammer pendant darkens against wool, a dream is remembered, then left to wait. Somewhere beyond the snow, a church bell may ring, thin and distant, or perhaps only the wind sounds over the frozen field. Either way, the household listens. In 1011 winter is not empty. It is crowded with powers, names, warnings, blessings, and half-seen presences pressing close to the fire, asking to be respected until morning comes. The unseen powers remain close through the night. But by morning, the body reminds you that not every danger needs a spirit's name. A cough begins before dawn. At first, it is only one person, curled near the wall, trying to keep the sound small. Then it deepens, catches, and shakes the chest. Someone stirs, someone mutters. The fire is still low, hidden under ash, and the longhouse lies in that cold hour when everything feels damp, dim, and slightly unfair. The cough comes again. This time an older woman lifts her head and listens properly. Winter sickness moves through a crowded house like smoke. It does not need permission. Close sleeping places, shared air, low nutrition, damp clothing, indoor animals, smoke from the hearth, lice, fleas, and the simple exhaustion of the season all give illness room to work. You can feel the unease move through the household. Not panic. These people know coughs, they know fever. They know aching joints, sore throats, infected cuts, tooth pain, childbirth danger, stomach trouble, and the dull weakness that comes when food has been stretched too thin for too long. But familiarity is not comfort. A familiar danger can still take a seat by the fire. The sick person is given a warmer place, or at least as warm as can be managed without starting a seating dispute before breakfast. A cup is brought. Steam rises from something bitter. Perhaps herbs have been steeped. Perhaps honey is added if the household has any, because honey is sweetness, medicine, and treasure all at once. A cloth is placed near the mouth, a hand touches the forehead. The gesture is practical, but you see the worry under it. Medical care in the Viking Age drew on household knowledge, herbal remedies, wound care, heat, rest, food, charms, prayers, and experience passed through families and communities. Some treatments were sensible, some were symbolic, many were probably both. People did not divide healing into neat modern categories. If a plant eased pain, good. If a prayer strengthened courage, good. If a charm gave the patient hope, also good. When options are limited, every kind of help is invited indoors. You smell the herbs as the cup passes near you. Bitter green, smoky, a little sweet. Plants such as yarrow, angelica, nettle, plantain, onion, garlic, juniper, and many others were known in northern folk practice and medieval medicine, though exactly what appears in this particular cup depends on place, season, and memory. A healer may be a woman of the household, an older relative, a person with special reputation, or simply whoever knows what helped last time. The past is full of medicine made by people who cannot afford to be helpless. An unexpectedly intimate survival tool sits nearby the comb. Viking Age combs, often made from bone or antler, are common archaeological finds. And they were not just vanity items, they helped manage hair, remove tangles, and, very importantly, deal with lice. Lice are not glamorous. They do not care about your warrior reputation. They crawl across kings and children with perfect democracy. In a smoky winter house, with wool layers and close sleeping, small parasites can become part of daily misery. The comb passes through hair slowly, patiently, with tiny sounds that make your own scalp suspicious. The sick person coughs again. Someone moves a lamp closer, and the face appears pale in the amber light. A child watches from under a blanket, eyes wide. An adult gives the child a look that says, "Do not ask too many questions," which of course makes the child want to ask every question ever invented. Illness teaches children too. It teaches them that bodies are fragile, that adults worry, that warmth matters, that a household can become very quiet around one bed. Hunger makes sickness worse by midwinter. Stores may be declining. The strongest food may be saved for those who need labour strength. For children, for the ill, for pregnant women, for guests of importance, or for people whose status places them first. These choices are not always kind, but they are rarely simple. You watch a small portion of better broth given to the coughing person. A man notices and says nothing. He may be hungry too. Silence can be generosity when bowls are thin. The tension around childbirth is another winter shadow. Somewhere in this household, or in one nearby, a pregnant woman may be counting not only months but weather, food, and help. Birth in 1011 is dangerous in any season. In winter, darkness, cold, poor travel, and crowded conditions add their own weight. Women attend women, hands boil water if fuel can be spared, cloth is warmed, charms or prayers may be spoken. The household waits, because every birth is both ordinary and terrifying. A baby is future labour, future kin, future memory. A mother's survival is the centre of everything, even when no one says it aloud. Modern researchers still work carefully through skeletal evidence, burial patterns, written sources, and later traditions to understand health in Viking Age communities. It is tempting to imagine everyone as either brutally hardy or constantly suffering. But the truth resists that tidy picture. Some people lived into old age. Some healed from severe injuries, some carried chronic pain. Some children died young, some communities had better diets or cleaner conditions than others. Health was shaped by status, region, season, workload, violence, childbirth, disease, and luck. Luck, unfortunately, remains very well represented. You notice old injuries in the room now. A man's hand is stiff from a break that healed poorly. An older woman shifts her weight away from one hip. Someone's teeth are worn flat from gritty grain, age, and hard food. Toothache must be one of winter's private cruelties. There is nowhere to escape it. It sits in the jaw while you grind grain, while you listen to stories, while you try to sleep. Archaeological remains often show dental wear, tooth loss, and abscesses among medieval populations. A bad tooth could poison more than the mood. Cuts are feared too. A small wound from a knife, tool, animal horn, or splinter can become swollen and hot. Without antibiotics, infection is a serious guest. People clean wounds as best they can, use dressings, herbs, honey in some traditions, or other substances known through practice. They watch for redness, fever, foul smell, weakness. The body either turns back the danger or does not. There is no modern certainty waiting in a cabinet. Smoke keeps returning as both helper and harm. It dries, preserves, warms, and irritates. A person with weak lungs may suffer most near the hearth, but moving away means cold. The coughing person chooses warmth, as most would. Their breath rattles, settles, rattles again. Someone rubs their back. The gesture is small and old. There are also illnesses of the spirit, though the household may not speak of them that way. Winter sadness, fear, irritability, grief for someone absent overseas, anxiety about stores, the dull heaviness that comes from too little light and too much smoke. People answer with work, talk, prayer, jokes, games, touch, ale when available, and the simple discipline of routine. Not because routine cures everything, it does not, but routine carries people when hope is tired. By afternoon, the sick person sleeps, the cough has not vanished, but it has loosened. The household exhales a little. Work resumes around the bed, quieter than before. Grain is ground, cloth is mended, animals are fed, a pot warms. Life does not pause completely for illness, because winter would take advantage. Yet the rhythm has changed. People step softer. The better cloak remains over the sleeper. Someone checks the cup, someone watches the face. You sit near the wall and feel the tenderness hidden inside practicality. No one gives a speech about community care. No one needs to. Care is the warm drink, the saved broth, the shifted sleeping place, the hand on the forehead, the comb through hair. The old remedy remembered at the right moment. Care is also the hard truth that the fire must be tended and the animals must eat even while someone suffers. As night returns, the cough sounds once more, Softer now, outside, snow gathers on the roof. Inside, the longhouse breathes its smoky, crowded breath. Sickness remains beneath the roof beams like a shadow. But so does stubborn life, passing cups, warming cloth, counting pulses, and holding on through one more cold, watchful night by the next day. The cough has softened enough that the household allows itself to look outward again, not far outward. Winter still keeps everyone on a short rope, but the sky has cleared, the wind has dropped, and someone needs to check the shoreline. Perhaps there is a boat to inspect, a net to retrieve, driftwood to look for, traps to examine, or simply the old human urge to stand before the sea and ask whether it is still there. So you wrap yourself in wool, pull your hood low, and step out into a world made hard and bright by frost. The path toward the shore is narrow, packed by feet and sledges. Snow lies deep on either side, smooth except where animal tracks stitch across it. Birch branches scratch at the pale sky. Pines hold white weight on their dark arms. The cold is clean here, away from the longhouse smoke, and it enters your lungs like a warning. Every breath feels too sharp at first, then strangely pleasant, until your nose begins to object. The sea announces itself before you see it, not with waves, not today, but with a hollow quiet. In summer, the shore would be full of motion gulls, boats, oars, voices, nets, fish smell, wet rope, and the slap of water against hulls. Now the sound is restrained. Ice has taken much of the surface near the inlet, locking it into pale plates and grey seams. Farther out, darker water may remain open, shifting slowly under the winter light. The boundary between solid and liquid is uneasy. It cracks, whispers, and reminds you not to trust appearances. You reach the shoreline and stop. The tide, if you are in a tidal place, has left ridges and frozen shelves along the rocks. Seaweed lies stiff and dark, glazed with ice. Pebbles are sealed beneath transparent skins. A gull stands on one leg and looks personally offended by the weather. Beyond it, the water breathes through gaps in the ice. The ocean feels less like a road now and more like a sleeping animal, immense, blocked, and listening for people in the Viking world. The sea was not only a route for raiding or glory, it was food, trade, communication, danger, weather, and work. Coastal households depended on fishing, boat travel, seal hunting, in some regions, collecting seaweed, gathering driftwood, and moving goods or people when conditions allowed. In winter, these connections did not vanish, but they became uncertain. Ice could protect a shoreline or imprison it. It could make travel easier across some frozen waters and deadly across others. It could offer seals, fish, and shortcuts, then betray anyone who misread it. You step carefully onto a frozen margin, not the deep sea ice, just a firm shelf near the shore. It groans faintly. Your entire modern soul decides this is enough adventure. The person beside you tests with a staff, listening. Ice knowledge is not casual. Colour, sound, thickness, snow cover, currents, tide, wind, and recent weather all matter. A glossy dark patch can be danger. A white drift may hide weakness. Ice over moving salt water is not the same as ice on a pond. The shoreline is a classroom where failure can be very cold and very final. There is ongoing uncertainty among environmental historians about the exact severity of winters in different parts of the Norse world around 1011, since local weather varied and climate evidence comes through indirect traces such as ice cores, tree rings, settlement patterns, and written hints. It was not one identical frozen scene from Greenland to Denmark to Norway to the Danelaw. Some coasts might see heavy ice, others might remain navigable more often. Here, in this imagined farm landscape, winter has tightened its grip, but even that grip is uneven. A channel remains open, a current resists freezing. The sea keeps one eye awake. Down by a sheltered cove, boats rest above the reach of ice. Their hulls are pulled onto supports or the shore, dark with tar and weather. Snow gathers along their ribs. They look like sleeping creatures with their bellies exposed to winter. Someone brushes snow away and checks a seam. Another person looks at a rope stiffened by frost. Hands move over wood, feeling for cracks. A boat that fails in swimwind can drown a season's hopes before anyone has gone far from land. The smell here is different from the longhouse. Salt, ice, tar, old fish, frozen seaweed, and cold wood. It is cleaner, but lonelier. You hear the faint creak of hulls, the tap of loose rigging, the distant bark of a seal, or perhaps a bird whose voice sounds too strange in the cold. If seals are nearby, they may surface through breathing holes or open leads, sleek heads appearing and vanishing with an ease that makes humans look badly designed. Seals provide meat, oil, skins, and stories. Though hunting them requires skill and patience, the animal world knows winter in ways people study with envy. One unusual detail from northern coastal life is the value of driftwood, especially in places where good timber was scarce. A log delivered by the sea could be a gift from currents, storms, distant forests, and luck. People might collect it carefully, mark it, argue over it, or use it for building, fuel, tools, and repair. Imagine being excited by a wet log on a freezing beach. Then imagine having to build your life without a hardware store. Suddenly the log becomes thrilling, possibly too thrilling, but winter lowers everyone's entertainment standards. Fishing remains possible in many winter settings. Nets, lines, hooks, traps, and local knowledge matter. In some places, fish can be caught through ice or from open water near shore. The household may rely on dried stores more than fresh catch now, but any new food is welcome. You watch someone examine a net that has frozen stiff in places. Fingers pick at knots. A tear is noted for repair. Fish bones found in Viking Age settlements show the importance of marine resources across many regions, from local consumption to large-scale drying and trade. The sea feeds people even when fields sleep, yet the sea also takes. Everyone here knows someone who did not return, if not personally then through story. A storm in summer can be terrible. A winter shore adds ice, numb hands, short light, and water that steals breath almost instantly. The ocean does not become safer because people understand it. It only becomes readable enough that skilled people may survive more often than foolish ones. You look outward across the frozen grey. Somewhere beyond the horizon lie other farms, towns, kingdoms, monasteries, markets, and armies. England sits across the North Sea, troubled and wealthy. Norway's coast twists into fjords and islands. Denmark controls passages and power. Iceland, Greenland, the Baltic, Ireland, the Frankish lands, the Rus routes, all belong to this wider watery world. But today, the sea is closed at the edges. It keeps those places distant, like memories behind glass. The person beside you kneels to collect something from the frozen rack line, a usable length of wood, a shell, a piece of rope, perhaps seaweed that can serve some household use. Nothing is ignored automatically. The shore is a storehouse if you know how to read it. It gives fuel, food, materials, warnings, and news. A strange object washed up may speak of storms far away. A dead fish, a broken plank, a foreign fragment. All can become conversation by the hearth. The light begins to thin, though it feels as if the day only just opened. Winter does not care about your schedule. You turn back from the shore, carrying cold in your boots and salt in the hem of your cloak. Behind you, the ice creaks softly, the boats remain sleeping, the seals surface and vanish. The ocean waits, neither friend nor enemy, simply immense. As you climb the snowy path toward the farm, smoke appears again above the longhouse roof. The sight warms you before the fire does. You realize that the sea in winter is not absent from Viking life. It is present as silence. Stored fish, repaired boats, tarred seams, driftwood, danger, longing, and the promise of movement trapped under ice. By the time you reach the door, your cheeks burn and your hands ache. Inside, someone will ask what you saw. You will say the boat still hold. The ice is thick near the cove. Open water shows beyond the point, and there may be seals close by. The household will listen, because even in deepest winter, the sea is part of the room, breathing just beyond the snow. The shoreline follows you back indoors in the smell of salt on wool and the stiffness in your fingers. When the longhouse door closes behind you, heads turn toward the cold air that slips in around your legs. Someone asks about the boats, someone asks whether the ice has reached the outer rocks, someone asked whether seals were seen, and the question is not idle curiosity. A seal can mean meat, oil, skin, and a story worth repeating. You answer as best you can, and the room absorbs the news the way it absorbs smoke, slowly, unevenly, and with everyone taking what they need from it. Then another kind of news rises from the benches. It comes from a traveller who arrived before dusk, a man with tired eyes, a frost-roughened beard, and a cloak smelling of road, horse, and someone else's hearth. He has come from a larger settlement, or from a hall where other travellers gathered, and he carries more than a bundle. He carries England. At first, the word seems too large for the room. England is not here. Here are the pot, the dogs, the children, the animals breathing behind the partition, the mended sleeves, the old quarrel over hay, the cough that has not fully left. Yet England enters anyway, through the traveller's mouth, and suddenly the smoky longhouse stretches across the sea. In 1011, Scandinavian forces are deeply involved in England's suffering and politics. Danish armies under leaders such as Thorkel the Tall are active there, and the English kingdom under King Ethelred is under heavy pressure from raids, tribute demands, and war. Canterbury is attacked in 1011, and Archbishop Elfhere is taken captive. A grim sign of how far violence and ransom politics reach into religious and royal life. These events may be far from this farm, but not so far that people here can ignore them. Silver crosses water, men cross water, news crosses water, though it limps a little and exaggerates whenever it finds an audience. The traveller lowers himself near the fire and accepts a cup. He takes too long to drink, which is either exhaustion or theatre, probably both. Everyone waits. Even the child pretending not to listen has gone very still. The traveller says that more tribute has been demanded. He says towns have paid. He says churches are not safe. He says men have grown rich, and others have vanished. He says a lord's following is gathering. He says someone's cousin has returned with English silver. He says another man did not return at all. The room shifts. You hear small sounds, a breath held, a knife set down, a spindle pausing. England is opportunity and threat together. To some, it means wealth. To others, death. To those left behind, it means absence, waiting, fear, and perhaps new status if silver comes home. The sea, silent and ice-edged this morning, now seems crowded with ships in memory. A man near you asks whether the traveller has heard of a particular name. The traveller frowns, searches his memory, gives an uncertain answer. Maybe, perhaps with Thorkel's men, perhaps in the south, perhaps alive when last heard. You feel the cruelty of vague news, a clear death wounds once, uncertain survival wounds repeatedly. There is a small, strange detail in the movement of Viking Age silver that makes the room feel connected to the world beyond imagination. English coins from payments and plunder have been found in Scandinavian hoards, sometimes cut, weighed, pierced, or mixed with silver from Islamic, German, and other sources. A coin made under an English name might end up buried in a northern field, hidden by someone who never returned to collect it. Money travels farther than comfort. It sleeps in soil with stories no one can fully recover. Someone asks about hostages and captives. The traveller nods. Captivity is part of this world of warfare: ransom, slavery, politics, and bargaining. A noble captive can mean payment. A churchman can become leverage. Ordinary captives can become labour, trade goods, household dependence, or sorrow carried into another language. The conversation does not linger too tenderly there, but you feel the unease. The Viking world is not only bold sailors and clever merchants, it is also people taken from homes, people sold, people waiting, people never named in the songs. There is much discussion among modern historians about how people in Scandinavia understood and judged overseas violence at the time. Did they see it mainly as legitimate warfare? Opportunity? Service to leaders? Revenge? Trade by force? Or something morally troubled by Christian teaching that was spreading through the same societies? The answer cannot be one simple mood. In this longhouse, you can sense pride, anxiety, greed, grief, curiosity, and piety all sharing the same bench. A man may admire courage and still fear for his son. A woman may welcome silver and hate the voyage that brings it. A Christian may condemn violence in one sentence and accept its profits in the next. People are rarely tidy enough to satisfy later centuries. The traveller describes English towns with walls, churches, markets, and more wealth than seems reasonable. He mentions broad rivers, rich estates, and the heavy payments sometimes called danegeld, though the word has its own history and usage. Tribute is not abstract. It becomes arm rings, coins, weapons, cattle, marriage, wages, and power back home. A successful man can return with silver enough to change his standing. He can buy land, secure alliances, improve a household, attract followers, or become unbearably mug at every feast for the next 20 years. Yet the room also remembers cost. One woman asks whether the ships had enough men. Another asks whether the English are gathering stronger resistance. An older man mutters that kings far away spend young men like kindling. No one laughs. The fire cracks softly, as if embarrassed. You think of the farm's winter stores, fish in the rafters, grain in sacks, hay for cattle, cloth under repair. These are local measures of survival. Then you think of armies in England, feeding themselves from tribute, plunder, supply, and fear. War is also a household matter, only enlarged until its hunger covers counties. The same questions return at every scale. Who eats? Who pays? Who waits? Who freezes? Who comes home? The traveller unwraps a small object from cloth. It's a coin, or perhaps a cut piece of silver. People lean in. Firelight trembles across it. Someone takes it, weighs it in the hand, then passes it on. Its value is felt physically. Weight, shine, sound, edge. The coin is a messenger from abroad, but also a temptation. You can almost see spring stirring in the eyes around you. When the ice loosens, who will go? Who will stay? Who will argue that the farm needs him? Who will argue that the farm needs what he might bring back? The news of Canterbury, of captives, of tribute, and of armies does not arrive like a formal chronicle. It arrives broken, smoky, uncertain, and alive. Names are misremembered. Places are pronounced differently. Events are compressed. A rumour that took weeks to travel may have grown taller in every hall it passed through. Still, beneath the distortions lies a real-world emotion. England is bleeding silver. Scandinavian leaders are gaining power. Ordinary households are being pulled into consequences larger than their fields. Night deepens. The traveller eats, then grows quieter. The household continues to ask questions, but more slowly now. The children are sent towards sleep. Though their minds are full of ships and foreign towns, the men turn the silver over in memory, the women measure the news against food, labour, danger, and absence. The old people listen with faces that suggest they have heard versions of this before. Wealth comes, men go. Winter waits, spring decides. You settle back near the wall. Salt still dried at the edge of your cloak from the shore. This morning the sea seemed frozen and silent. Tonight it is loud with England. Captives, tribute, churches, coins, and the creak of ships not yet launched. The longhouse feels smaller and larger at once. Smaller because the walls press close. Larger because every person inside is connected by blood, rumour, silver, faith, violence, and longing, to a world far beyond the snow-covered yard. Outside, the farm lies still under winter. Inside, news keeps moving, bright and dangerous as a coal carried from one hearth to another. The news of England glows in the room long after the traveller stops speaking. It does what stories always do in winter. It makes the walls feel less solid. It opens the roof without letting in the snow. One moment you're in a smoky longhouse, listening to animals shift behind a partition. The next, you're imagining English church towers, river mouths, silver coins, ships under sail, captives walking cold roads, and men from this very region standing in foreign mud with rain running down their necks. A good story travels farther than a body can, which is fortunate, because at the moment most bodies here are not going anywhere beyond the privy path unless absolutely forced. After the meal, the traveller is given a better place by the fire. Not the best place, perhaps, but better than yours. This is reasonable. He has brought news, and news must be fed if you want more of it. The household settles into the older rhythm of listening. Bowls are set aside. A child is pulled back from poking the embers. Spinning continues. A knife is sharpened more slowly now, because the hand wants work while the mind follows words. Winter nights in the Viking world are long enough to need filling, and stories are not decoration. They preserve memory, teach conduct, entertain, warn, boast, comfort, and bind people together. Before the later written sagas were shaped on parchment, much of Norse tradition lived in spoken forms, tales of ancestors. Gods, feuds, voyages, settlements, monsters, riddles, poems, jokes, and legal memories. Some stories were grand, some were gossip wearing a nicer cloak, some were probably told mainly because everyone was trapped inside and the alternative was listening to someone chew. The traveller begins with a tale from the road. Not too heroic, which makes it more believable. A man lost his way in blowing snow. A horse refused a crossing before the ice cracked. A woman at a distant farm knew the right path because she remembered where the old birches stood before a storm broke them years ago. The story has no dragon, no king, no shining sword. It has weather, stubborn animals, and memory. Everyone listens because these are the things that actually decide whether people get home. Then someone asks for an older stage, not England this time. Something from before, something with shape. An old man near the wall clears his throat. The room adjusts. Even the children recognize the beginning of performance. He does not announce it like a modern presenter with a title slide. Thank mercy. He simply begins speaking in a different cadence, or more measured, with certain phrases that seem worn smooth by use. He tells of an ancestor who crossed a winter pass with too little food and too much pride. He tells of a feud settled not by the strongest man, but by a woman who remembered an oath made beside a burial mound. He tells of a ship that survived because one quiet man noticed a seam leaking before the rest began boasting about landfall. You hear the pattern: pride fails, memory saves. Attention matters, the stories are entertainment. Yes, but they are also instruction disguised as pleasure, which is far more effective than a lecture called Practical Risk Management in 11th century rural Scandinavia. Poetry enters too. Norse skaldic verse could be dense, intricate, and full of kennings, those compressed poetic descriptions where the sea might become the whale road or blood might be called battle sweat. Depending on the poet's taste and the listener's patience. Elite courts valued skilled poets, and poems could preserve praise, insult, history, and reputation in a farmhouse. The verse may be simpler, or fragments may be remembered rather than performed with courtly polish. Still, the pleasure of shaped language is real. A clever phrase earns a murmur. A remembered line brings nods. A clumsy one brings the kind of silence that encourages personal growth. There is lively discussion among literary historians about how much later saga writing preserves genuine Viking Age oral tradition, and how much reflects the concerns of the 13th century authors who wrote those stories down. Sitting here, you understand the difficulty. Spoken stories are living things. They change with each teller, each household, each winter, each political need. A tale told tonight may be old, but not untouched. Memory is not a storage chest. It is a loom. It keeps weaving. A younger person tries a riddle. Riddles are perfect winter creatures. Small, sharp, portable, and mildly irritating. The child grins with too much confidence and asks what walks without feet, speaks without a mouth, or some local equivalent involving smoke, ice, or a tool. The adults humour the child until the answer is guessed. Then someone offers a harder riddle, and the child's pride is gently crushed for educational purposes. This is community service. Board pieces come out again. Perhaps Nefertafel is set on a board scratched into wood, with attackers and defenders placed in careful arrangement. The game echoes conflict, encirclement, escape, and strategy. Fingers move pieces by firelight. Observers offer advice no one asked for. Someone makes a poor move and is informed of it with the restrained cruelty of family entertainment. You realize games help teach patience, planning, and how to lose without starting a blood feud, although results may vary. A strange but charming detail from the world of old entertainment is that flighting, the exchange of formal insults or verbal challenges, appears in Norse and wider Germanic tradition. It could be playful, ritualized, aggressive, or dangerous depending on setting. In a winter hall, verbal skill matters. A sharp tongue can win laughter, defend honor, or create problems that require compensation later. This is why the wise learn the difference between a joke and a legal expense. Tonight, the insults remain gentle. Someone teases the traveller about eating as if chased by wolves. He replies that at least wolves know when to stop talking. Laughter rises, warm and brief. The sick person from the previous day smiles without coughing, which feels like a small victory. Even the animal end of the house seems calmer, as if cows approve of well-timed sarcasm. Stories of the gods follow, though cautiously in a household where Christian belief may also be present. Thor fishing for the great serpent, Odin seeking wisdom at terrible cost, Loki making situations worse with remarkable consistency. These tales may be believed, half believed, enjoyed as inherited poetry, or treated differently by each listener. A cross-pendant catches firelight while an old god is named. No one necessarily finds this contradiction as dramatic as a later historian might. People can live with overlap when the winter is long. Then comes a ghost story, because apparently no era has been able to resist making bedtime worse. It concerns a mound, a dead man who did not stay quiet, footsteps outside in snow, and a door that opened though no hand touched it. The children edge closer to adults while pretending not to. A dog lifts its head at exactly the wrong moment, and everyone looks toward the door. Nothing is there. Probably. The storyteller pauses just long enough to be cruel, then continues in a softer voice. The room is fully gathered now. Work has slowed. Eyes shine in the low light, shadows move across the rafters, smoke thickens above the hearth, turning the air into layers. Story after story lays itself over the winter night England. Ancestors, gods, riddles, jokes, warnings, old grudges, impossible creatures, weather wisdom, and the comforting stupidity of people who made bad choices long ago so you can feel wiser tonight. You understand that storytelling is not escape from winter. It is part of surviving it. Stories stretch time when daylight is short. They make fear shareable. They carry lore, kinship, religion, humour, and practical advice. They let the absent return for an hour, the dead speak without leaving their graves, and distant places arrive without anyone opening the door. At last. Voices lower. One child has fallen asleep sitting up. The traveller's head nods forward. The old man's final words fade into the sound of the fire. Outside, snow covers the tracks again. Inside, memory remains warm, passed from mouth to mouth like a cup in the dark. When the last story thins into sleep, the hands of the household do not immediately surrender. Some people drift toward blankets and benches, but others remain awake in the ember glow, because winter is not only endured, it is made useful. The cold outside traps bodies indoors, yet inside the longhouse it gives time to smaller labours that summer often pushes aside. You begin to notice how the room has become a workshop after dark, full of quiet scraping, twisting, polishing, stitching, and sorting. The sounds are delicate compared with chopping wood or hauling water, but they matter just as much. A man near the wall holds a piece of wood in one hand and a knife in the other. He cuts slowly, shaving curls from the surface. Each thin strip drops onto his lap, pale in the firelight, smelling fresh and faintly sweet beneath the heavier smoke. The object taking shape might become a spoon, a peg, a handle, a toy, a small box fitting, or a repair piece for something larger. Wood is everywhere in this life. Bowls, cups, benches, chests, doors, tools, sledges, boats, roof beams, fences, looms, shafts, handles, and little carved comforts all begin in timber and the skill to shape it. Viking Age households relied heavily on home production and repair. Specialised craftsmen existed, especially in towns and trading centres, but farms still needed everyday competence with wood, bone, antler, leather, wool, iron, and fibre. A broken tool could not simply be replaced by clicking a button and complaining about delivery delays. Someone had to fix it, adapt it, borrow one, trade for one, or do without. Doing without is a very persuasive teacher. You sit close to the woodworker and watch the blade move. He cuts away from the thumb, mostly. A child watching nearby receives a warning before the mistake happens, which is the ideal version of education. The knife is small, sharp, and ordinary, but in skilled hands it produces useful shapes from stubborn material. Every surface is felt with the fingers, the eye sees, but the hand confirms. Smooth enough, too thin, still rough, good. Across the room, bone and antler are being worked. A length of antler may become a comb, pin, needle, gaming piece, or handle. The scraping produces a dry, faintly unpleasant smell when warmed by friction, something between dust, horn, and old teeth. You try not to think too hard about the teeth part. Viking Age combs made from antler or bone could be finely crafted from several pieces riveted together, with carefully cut teeth. This is not crude work. It is precise, patient, and surprisingly elegant, especially considering it may be used later to chase lice through smoky hair. Beauty and itch management, finally united. A small group sorts wool near the hearth. The fibres glow softly in the low light. Cream, grey, brown, perhaps dyed in places. Hands tease, twist, and wind. A spindle turns again, dropping and spinning, adding thread to thread. The motion looks almost sleepy until you understand the scale. One garment requires astonishing amounts of spinning, a sail requires far more. A blanket is not a blanket until countless tiny turns of fibre have become enough thread to weave. Winter evenings are measured in rotations of a spindle as surely as in meals or moon phases. There is still uncertainty about how often large sailcloth production was organised at the household level, compared with more coordinated labour under elites or communities. What is clear is that textiles were essential to travel, trade, identity, and survival. The same world that sends ships across the North Sea also depends on people sitting in dim rooms, turning wool into thread for so long that modern wrists ache in sympathy. The sea voyage begins beside the hearth long before the boat touches water. Leatherwork occupies another corner. A shoe needs mending. Perhaps the sole is worn thin or a seam is opened. The leather is softened carefully, not scorched. Awls, needles, sinew, linen thread, or leather strips may be used. The smell is warm and animal, mingled with smoke. Shoes are fragile in a winter of snow, ice, mud, and damp floors. A repaired shoe means a safer walk to the byre, the shore, the neighbour's farm, the assembly, the woodpile. Heroism is nice. Dry feet are better. Someone works a small piece of metal, not full blacksmithing inside the house, but repair. A rivet, a clasp, a ring, a buckle, a knife fitting. Large iron work belongs to a forge or smithing area where heat, sparks, tools, and fuel can be managed properly. Iron was precious, and smiths held important skills. Bloomeries, bog iron, trade iron, charcoal, hammers, anvils, and hard-learned technique all stand behind the simplest iron object in the room. A nail is not just a nail, it is ore, fire, labour, and someone's very strong arm. You imagine the smith nearby, if this farm has access to one, coaxing iron from bloom, hammering impurities away, shaping tools that decide the work of everyone else. Axes cut wood, knives prepare food, scythes and sickles harvest grass, nails and rivets hold boats, needles pull thread. Even the peaceful winter craft world rests on the metal that came through heat fierce enough to make the longhouse hearth seem like a polite candle. A curious little material in the Viking craft world is amber. In parts of the Baltic and beyond, amber was gathered, traded, carved, and valued for beads, amulets, gaming pieces, and decoration. Hold a polished bead near firelight and it seems to contain trapped sunset, which is exactly the sort of thing winter people might appreciate. Some believed amber held protective or special qualities, and even without magic it offers warmth to the eye in a season of grey. You can see why someone would treasure it. It is a tiny fossilized rebellion against dull weather. Near the bench, a woman repairs a woven band. Tablet weaving can create strong, patterned bands used for clothing edges, belts, straps, or decoration. The patterns may be simple or elaborate. Depending on skill and purpose, a narrow band can carry colour, status, and structural strength. You watch the threads shift as small tablets turn, and the pattern emerges like a secret becoming useful. It is careful work, and the room respects it by mostly not knocking anything over. Craft also includes children's learning. A boy is allowed to sand a piece of wood. A girl copies a stitch on a scrap. A younger child threads beads and drops one, producing a tiny crisis under the bench. Everyone searches briefly because beads are not to be abandoned to the dirt like worthless modern packaging. The bead is found. The child is triumphant. The adults behave as if this was not the most exciting event of the last 10 minutes, though it absolutely was. As you look around, you see how repair shapes the whole winter. Nothing remains new for long. Bowls crack, handles loosen, cloth tears, shoes leak, harness rubs thin, nets break, sledge runners split. The household answers with patches, bindings, pegs, stitches, wedges, rivets, knots, and substitutions to modernize. This might look like poverty or inconvenience, and often it is, but it is also a philosophy of materials used fully. Repair wisely, transform when needed, waste almost nothing. Craft gives dignity to confinement. While snow blocks roads and ice holds boats, people still create. They prepare for spring. Yes, but they also make beauty. A carved line on a spoon, a patterned band at a sleeve, a polished comb, a bead strung near the throat, a neat patch on a cloak. These small beauties matter because winter tries to reduce life to necessity. People answer by making necessity pleasing where they can. The fire lowers further. The knife is wiped and put away. The spindle rests. The leather shoe is set near warmth to dry. The antler dust is brushed aside. The child's bead is tucked into a pouch. Around you, the workshop becomes a sleeping house again. But the work remains in changed objects. A spoon smoother than before. A shoe ready for snow. Thread wound for weaving. A repaired strap that may hold when spring travel begins. You lie back and feel the quiet power of it. Viking winter is not only waiting for Thor, not only hunger, smoke and stories, it is transformation by small increments. Under the blackened beams, hands turn raw things into useful things, broken things into working things, plain things into objects touched by care. Outside, the cold hardens the world. Inside, people keep shaping it. The small crafted things remain where they were left, cooling beside the hearth, and slowly the world outside begins to change before anyone fully trusts it. At first, Thor is only a sound. You hear it while lying near the wall in the grey before morning. A soft drip from the roof, then another, then a faint sliding whisper as snow shifts along the turf above. No one celebrates. That would be foolish. Winter has a cruel sense of humour and can pretend to loosen its grip just long enough for people to make optimistic mistakes. Still, the sound is there. Drip, pause, drip, rip. A tiny wet clock counting toward movement. By daylight. The yard looks different. Not warmer exactly, but less sealed. The snow has sunk around fence posts. The path between longhouse and byre has turned glossy in places. Packed hard by many feet and slick enough to punish the overconfident. Icicles hang longer from the eaves, clear at the pips, clouded near the roof. A dark patch of earth shows near the woodpile. The first exposed skin of the farm. It is not beautiful in a heroic way. It is mud. But after weeks of white and grey, mud feels almost like a flower. You step outside and immediately nearly slip. Spring, it turns out, begins by trying to throw you onto your back. The household is not sentimental about this. Someone tells you to watch your feet. Someone else laughs quietly, which is fair. Thor is not gentle. It turns paths into slush, roofs into hazards, yards into mud, and stored smells into bold new expressions of themselves. All the frozen refuse, dung, ash, and damp straw that winter politely held in place now begins to rejoin the living world. The air grows richer, not better, richer. The Norse farm year depends on the transition from winter storage to renewed outdoor labour. As snow retreats, people prepare fields, check fences, repair tools, assess livestock, plan travel, and measure remaining food against the time before fresh growth. Fishing, trades, and movement become easier. This edge of spring can be one of the most anxious periods. Winter stores are low, but the land has not yet begun giving much back. The Thor promises relief while also revealing damage. You walk toward the animals, they sense change too. The cattle shift restlessly. Sheep crowd near the door, sniffing the wet air with sudden interest. A goat attempts to become everyone's problem at once. The animals have survived, or most of them have, and now their bodies must carry the household into the growing season. A thin cow is worry on legs. A pregnant ewe is hope with hooves. A lame horse is a whole season of difficulty standing in one corner. Hay stores are checked again. The remaining bundles look smaller than anyone wants. Fingers pull at the dry stems. A face tightens. Will it last until grazing improves? Can branches be cut for fodder? Is there a sheltered patch where animals might browse soon? The household does not say supply chain risk, because it has dignity, but that's what this is. The living inventory must survive the hungry gap, that dangerous space between old food and new food. In some northern farming systems, people used leaf fodder, cut branches, bark, seaweed, or other supplementary feed depending on region and need. This was not first-choice banquet dining for cattle, but winter rarely asks for first choices. Imagine explaining to a cow that today's special is twig. The cow may not appreciate your seasonal constraints, yet such measures could matter when hay ran short. Survival often looks like giving an animal something less than ideal and hoping it is enough. The roof must be checked. Snowmelt finds every weakness. A drip inside the longhouse is not charming rustic atmosphere when it lands on bedding. Stored grain, or someone's forehead at midnight. Turf roofs insulate well, but they require care. Water can work through gaps. Supporting beams may need inspection. Walls that held firm under dry cold now face damp. Winter's hard enemy becomes spring's soft enemy, and both are annoying. You help carry things out for air, damp cloth, bedding, tools, perhaps containers that need cleaning. Sunlight, weak but real, reaches them. Smoke smell rises from wool. Mildew is hunted. Leather is checked for rot. Stored grain is inspected for moisture and gnawing. Dried fish are examined. Anything spoiled is loss, and loss at this stage tastes bitter. You see someone cut away a bad piece and save what can be saved. Nothing gets thrown aside casually. Even disappointment is trimmed carefully. The thaw also uncovers what snow concealed. A broken fence rail, a lost mitten, now flattened and tragic. Animal droppings, a dead branch fallen near the path. The edge of a tool misplaced weeks ago and rediscovered with accusations. Tracks appear in mud where snow once blurred them. The world becomes readable again, but the reading is not always pleasant. There is real debate among climate and settlement researchers about how much seasonal stress shaped choices to move, trade, raid, or intensify farming in different Norse communities. It is too simple to say winter alone drove expansion, just as it is too simple to ignore the pressure of short-growing seasons, pasture limits, inheritance, ambition, and opportunity. Standing in this muddy yard, you can feel how environmental pressure and human desire overlap. Hunger nudges, status pulls, weather blocks, silver beckons. A household decision may begin with a nearly empty hayloft and end with a man crossing the sea. Inside, plans multiply. A plough or eye must be inspected. Harness repaired. Seed grain checked. Though using too much seed grain as food during winter would make spring harder. Fishing gear needs attention. Boats must be readied when ice breaks enough to launch safely. Messages delayed by snow can soon travel. Disputes held near the hearth can move toward assembly. A marriage arrangement may be revisited. A debt may come due. The farm, so inward for months, starts pushing its attention outward. You feel this restlessness in everyone. The children want to run farther than the yard. The men speak more often of the shore. The women count stores with a different urgency. Not only how long can this last, but what must be ready when movement begins. The old people watch the weather with suspicion. They have seen false springs. They know a mild day can be followed by hard frost, that lambs can be born into snow, that mud can become ice by evening, that optimism should wear boots. The shore changes too. Ice loosens at the edges, dark water widens, cracks appear, then channels. A boat remains on land, but people visit it more often, touching the hull, checking seams, discussing repairs. The sea does not open all at once, it offers hints. A lid of water here, floating ice there, birds returning in greater numbers, the smell of salt growing stronger. Movement gathers in fragments, at the field edge. Snow pulls back from old stubble. The soil beneath is cold, heavy, and waiting. You kneel and touch it. Wet earth clings to your fingers. It smells of rot, mineral, thawed roots, and the hidden work of time. The fields are not ready, but they are no longer sealed. That matters. After so many nights of smoke and stored food, the ground itself seems to breathe, Yet relief is cautious, the household is tired. Winter has taken fat from bodies, strength from animals, patience from tempers, and stores from chests. Some people are thinner, some coughs remain, some arguments have not been solved, some absent kin have not returned. Spring does not erase winter, it reveals what winter has done. As evening comes, the dripping slows and the air cools again. Meltwater hardens along the path. The yard shines dangerously under the low light. You step back into the longhouse and bring with you the smell of mud, wet wool, and something like promise. The fire is still needed. The walls are still smoky. The food is still counted. But now, beneath the familiar sounds, another rhythm has begun. Drip from the roof, crack in the ice, hoof stamping at the door, tools being laid ready, voices turning toward roads, fields, shore, assembly, and sea. Winter has not ended. Not quite, but its edges are thinning, and everyone can hear it. By the next morning, the thin music of thaw has become part of every thought. You hear it in the roof drips, in the slush underfoot, in the restless animals pushing their noses toward the door. You hear it in the way people speak, with slightly more air behind their words, as if the walls have moved outward during the night. The longhouse is still smoky, the benches are still hard, the food stores are still watched with the same sharp eyes, but something has shifted. Winter no longer feels endless, it feels like a tired guard at the gate, still armed, still dangerous, but beginning to blink. You step outside with the others, and the yard is alive with unpleasant promise. Mud sucks at your shoes. Meltwater trickles along the old footpaths, carrying ash, straw dung, and bits of winter's forgotten business toward lower ground. The snow is no longer smooth, it is dented, grey, crusted, collapsing around posts and stones. A child pokes at a shrinking drift with a stick, deeply satisfied by its defeat. A dog rolls in something newly uncovered and is instantly unpopular. This is not the gentle spring of painted calendars. This is the first departure from winter, and departure is messy. Everyone works with urgency because the season changes faster than comfort does. Wood must still be carried, animals must still be fed, roof leaks need mending, tools need checking, paths need clearing, stored food must be protected from damp. The household is not stepping from hardship into ease. It is stepping from one kind of labour into another. Farm work begins to stretch outward again. Fields wait beyond the yard, still cold and heavy, but no longer buried in the same deep silence. Fences must be repaired before animals are moved. Dung and old bedding may be hauled where they can enrich soil. Seed grain must be guarded until sowing. The plough or aired, harness, yokes, and hand tools are inspected because a broken part at the wrong moment can cost precious days. In the Viking Age, most people in the Norse world depended on farming, stock raising, fishing, craft, and seasonal movement far more than on the raiding image that later fame prefers. Spring is not a cinematic charge, it is mud, seed, rope, animal breath, and the anxious hope that last year's planning was enough. You walk toward the byre, where the animals sense change with an energy that makes the air twitch. Sheep press forward. The cattle turn their heads toward the outside light. A horse tosses its mane and stamps, impatient after weeks of confinement. They are thinner than they were in autumn, but they are alive. That matters more than beauty. A surviving cow is milk to come, calves to hope for, manure for fields, status in the community, and warmth remembered from winter nights. A living ewe carries wool and perhaps lambs. The household reads animals the way it reads weather carefully, because the future is written in ribs, hooves, eyes, and appetite. There is a curious old rhythm to this moment. The very dung that offended your nose all winter becomes wealth when the soil opens. Manure mixed with straw and bedding can be spread on fields, returning nutrients to the ground. So the long months of stink were not merely an assault on dignity, they were a savings account. earthy and aromatic with terrible branding. You may not enjoy carrying it. Nobody expects you to. History does not require enthusiasm, only participation. Down at the shore, the boats wait for decision. The ice has broken farther from the cove, and dark water fashes between pale plates. Men and women go to inspect hulls, ropes, oars, and nets. A boat is pushed slightly, tested, not yet launched. Tar is checked, seams are felt by hand, sails and lines, if stored, must be aired, repaired, and prepared. The sea is becoming road again. That thought changes the faces around you. It brings eagerness, fear, calculation, and a little vanity too, because humans can make even dangerous travel about reputation if given the chance. The news from England has not faded. It sits inside the thaw like a bright coin under melting snow. Men speak of who may go when ships move freely. Women speak of what labour will remain if they do. Older people remind everyone that spring storms can kill fools before they have time to become legends. Someone mentions tribute, silver, Canterbury, captives, Thorkel's men, and the uncertain promises carried by returning travellers. The sea opening means trade, fishing, visiting kin, attending assemblies, pursuing settlements, perhaps joining violence abroad. Every path that winter closed now asks to be chosen. Researchers still differ on how families made those choices in practice. Did a young man leave because a leader called him? Because land at home was limited? Because silver tempted him? Because kin expected it? Because he wanted honour? Or because staying felt smaller than risk often? The answer must have been several things at once. From this farm you can feel the braid tightening hunger, ambition, duty, inheritance, rumour, faith, weather, and the stubborn desire to return with a story worth telling by next winter's fire. The assembly season approaches too. The dispute over hay and boundary cannot sleep forever. When paths firm enough for travel, witnesses may be called, claims made, settlements shaped. Winter talk becomes public speech. The old woman's memory of the boundary may matter as much as any young man's temper. Compensation may settle the matter, if pride permits, if pride refuses. Then spring may carry anger outward with the meltwater. The world opens, and not only for good things. Inside the longhouse, packing and sorting begin in small ways. A repaired shoe is matched with its pair, a cloak is shaken out, a pouch is checked for a knife, a comb, a fire striker, a bit of cord. Food for a journey must be considered. Dried fish, hard bread, cheese if there is any to spare, perhaps a little ale, perhaps not. Nobody packs lightly because travel is romantic. They pack because hunger travels too. You take one last slow look around the winter room. The blackened beams, the hearth where embers were guarded under ash, the benches polished by bodies, the loom waiting near the wall, the storage chests, the hanging fish, the worn bowls, the sleeping places, the animal warmth at the far end all winter. This house has been a world. Now it becomes a harbour from which people will move out again. The children feel it most openly. They run in the yard, slipping, shouting, discovering mud as if they invented it. They are thinner, perhaps, and smoke-haired, and full of stories too large for their mouths. They have learned winter chores, winter fears, winter games, winter silence. Soon they will learn spring mud, spring planting, spring animals, spring travel, spring scolding. Their lives continue in layers, one season teaching the next. The sick person from days before stands near the doorway wrapped in wool, pale but upright. Someone tells them to go back inside before the damp gets into their chest. They roll their eyes, which is a fine sign of recovery. A woman with keys at her belt checks the store once more. A man lifts a repaired strap and tests it. The traveller who brought news looks toward the shore. You step beyond the threshold. Behind you, smoke rises from the roof into the cool air. Before you, the path descends through slush toward the fields, the neighbour's farm and the shore, the assembly, the sea, and all the waiting trouble of the wider world. Winter has not disappeared. It has entered you. It is in the careful way you count food, the respect you give wool, the gratitude you feel for fire, the suspicion you hold toward weather, the patience learned from animals breathing in darkness. And as the first real movement of spring begins, you carry winter with you like a hidden ember, not bright, not loud, but alive. The farm grows quieter now, and so do you. The hard edges of the year soften in your mind. The smoke thins, the cold loosens its fingers, the longhouse settles behind you, not as a place of discomfort now, but as a small warm shape in memory, full of breathing, murmuring, stitching, grinding, coughing, laughing, and waiting. You have walked through its winter carefully. You have felt the bite of the doorway, the sting of smoke, the weight of water buckets, the roughness of wool, the ache of short daylight, and the deep relief of a bowl held warm in both hands. Now the scene can fade. The snow on the roof becomes only a pale blanket. The muddy yard grows still. The cattle lower their heads. The sheep press close together. The tools rest where they have been set down. The sea beyond the shore no longer calls loudly. It only breathes in the distance, slow and dark, carrying ships, rumours, silver, sorrow, and hope somewhere beyond the edge of hearing. You do not need to solve the winter now. You do not need to count the grain, mend the cloak, guard the embers, or test the ice. Those tasks belong to another night, another hand, another century. For this moment, you may simply rest beside the imagined fire, safe from the wind, while the old house breathes around you. The people of 1011 continue gently in the dark. Someone banks the coals, someone checks a sleeping child, someone pulls a cloak closer. Outside, the last snow drips from the eaves, one drop at a time, slower and slower, until even that sound becomes part of sleep, and you can let the farm drift away, soft as smoke, quiet as thawing snow, warm as an ember hidden under ash. Sweet dreams.